need to fix that. All right. So that said, we are here today for your Ignite class to learn about the purchase contract. And for those of you with Maui and Big Island and Kauai, we all use the same zip forms under one company, right? So our zip forms is going to be pre-filled. Tell me, those of you who are in Honolulu, do you have a pre-filled template that you're supposed to use? Okay, great. Awesome. So your templates and our templates might be filled out a little differently. And that's pretty cool because that'll just get us to have a good conversation about why would you do it one way versus another way? Because there is no perfect right way to do a contract. There's only what's perfect and right to satisfy your client's needs, right? So, okay. To start us out with, I want to make sure that you guys have access to the binder. And the first page in our chapter, this is week 2, day 3. Oh, and by the way, I'm Marian Haller, for those of you who haven't been here before. I'm a productivity coach and broker on Maui. So our binder for week 2, day 3, and you can put it on your screen too, right? Whichever way you have it, either in the binder, in the physical binder, or on the screen. What I recommend is that this page called Before You Write an Offer, right? It's called Before You Write an Offer. I highly, highly recommend you take a picture of this, put this on your phone, create a folder in your phone called Important Real Estate Documents, right? What are some things that you want to put there is this. This is your to-do list of what you need to do before you write an offer. You don't just say, oh, we want to write an offer on this and go and open zip forms and write an offer. No, you don't. So there's a whole bunch of steps, and this is your to-do list before. Another thing you might want to put into that folder is a seller's questionnaire. Oh, Bill, you have a question. Bill?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you were going to record the session. I noticed it's not being recorded.
Yes, it is.
I don't see a recording.
Yeah,
Oh.
It's recording.
Okay. I just.
Let me see.
Oh, wait, it's off. Never mind. It's off screen for me. Never mind. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. No, it is being recorded. Right. I made a mistake the other day. I've been told not to stop the recording. They edit it. They cut the long beginning out and they start it right from the when the subject starts. So cool. Thank you for reminding me, and lower your hand so that I don't think you're still asking a question. Thank you. What else do you put into that folder in your phone? A buyer's questionnaire, but more importantly, a seller's questionnaire, because sellers call you up out of the blue, right? Call you up and say, hi, I'm interested in selling my home and I'd like to talk to you about selling my property. And there are some questions you want to ask them before you even go to see them, right? So, oh my God, now you're going to go, oh my God, what do I do? Where's my questionnaire? If it's on your phone, you could just go right there. Old-fashioned people like me, we carried around a little notebook and we had some key documents in our notebook. And I used to call it my purple book. And my purple book had stuff in it that I knew I needed. So I had it with me at all times. And it got to be so that other agents in the office would say, Marian, do you have this in your purple notebook? Like, because they knew that I had this purple notebook, right? And it got really handy. So if you don't want to do it in your phone, that is a surefire way to also just create a notebook, and you can create the index yourself. It doesn't even have to be alphabetical as long as you know it's in there, right? All right. So what do we do before we write an offer? Before we write an offer, you want to call your broker and let your broker know, because in Hawaii, we need to have our brokers sign. Oops, there's a question from Kimberly.
Hi, I'm sorry. So I don't have a hard binder, and I'm just trying to, in the shared drive, figure out where we are.
Okay, great.
And so when I go into the Ignite January binder, I'm trying to figure out exactly where we are. So if I go week 2, day 4.
No, 3.
Oh, 3.
Yeah.
We're in week 3 already?
No, we are week 2, day 3.
Oh, day 3. Okay, is that
Day
because we
3.
missed yesterday?
Yesterday isn't in the binder, so it doesn't really count.
Okay.
Right? So here is what you should see as the first page in your binder. Week 2, day 3, right? And this is the document.
Just trying to figure it out because I don't have anything. I like to have paper in front of me, and it's really hard for me to try to find it online while I'm also having you on the screen because I don't have 2 screens in front of me, and so I'm trying to figure out. I want to be on the same page. That's all.
Just so you know, I only have 1 screen also.
Okay.
And what I do is rather than watch the screen from the slideshow, because sometimes that's too small, is I pull up the document that I want to look at, and the Zoom screen is its own screen. It's not part of your browser. So you can have the Zoom screen open and a document open so that you can manipulate it yourself as opposed to watching me scroll it, right?
Right.
So you can figure that out. That's a cool thing to do because that's like what I'm doing right now. That's how I don't have.
I'm just trying to, I was just trying to find the right page to get on. That's all. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. Okay, so and again, put your hand down. So there you go. Thank you. All right, so call your broker because your broker needs to know in advance. You know, I don't know what it is. People call me at all hours and say, I need a contract signed right now. And well, I'm at Costco and I'm on my phone. I can't read contracts on the phone. That's too small. That's too hard. So my iPad is in the car. I will be in my car in about a half an hour, Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, the idea is call your broker in advance and let your broker know I'm about to write a contract. Will you be available in about an hour or so, or an hour and a half? And then I can arrange myself to be available, right? So please do that. Next is you want to have this conversation with your buyer about, what's important to them, asking them some key questions. And one of the things I do is I have a blank piece of paper on my notepad, whatever it is I use regularly, right? My notebook, or a yellow legal pad, whatever it is. And I open up a blank page and I ask them right there, let's start with your name. I want to make sure I spell your name right? What is the spelling of your name? And guaranteed, if somebody's name is John Smith, they're going to spell it JONSMITHE. And so we can't assume anything. And I have made this mistake twice in my career. Once, okay, twice, no excuse. So I have learned it is so embarrassing to misspell your client's name. So please, please, please make sure you've got that spelling right. And then you want to ask them, so what's most important to you, right? About this purchase, what comes up that you want to make sure we cover? And guaranteed there's going to be some repair that really bugged them that needs to be done. The garage door opener didn't work right. So so we want the garage door to work right. Okay, the garage door, and you write it down. Garage door needs to be repaired, right? Is there anything else? No, okay, fine. All right. Now let's talk about some deadlines. Are you planning to be available for the next 45 days? Are you traveling? If they're on island or if they're off island, are they traveling? Is there any constraint in meeting any kind of deadlines? Nope, we're not traveling. Okay, great, fine. While you're together, what you should do is pull some comps, because now these people are going to know the market pretty well, right? They're going to know that because they've been looking. So they're going to be pretty familiar with what's on the market, but they're not familiar with what has sold and what did things actually sell at. So you need to pull that up at this point and go, okay, let's look at the last 60 days. What has sold and what price did it sell at, to give them the information they need in order to now think about, honey, what do you think we should offer, and talk about price, right? What do you think you should offer? So giving them the CMA and then letting them decide, right? Our job is not to name a price. Our job is to guide them, to help them understand the market. why do we not want to say, I think you should offer 750? Why do we not do that?
Because if they don't get it for 750, then they're like, well, you told me to do that.
That's a good reason. What's another reason? But
Or if the price drops, they're gonna blame on you later on. She told me to offer a
that's
750.
right. And ultimately, they need to own the price that they offer. They need to own it, right? And the comps should provide sufficient evidence for them to go, wow, this thing was listed at 735 and it sold at 760. Wow, this one was listed at 750 and it sold at 785. Wow, this one was listed at 710 and it sold at 740. Okay, do you see a pattern here? So the one we're interested in is listed at 750. How would you like to go about this? Now, let me tell you, if you want to go over asking price, there are some strategies we can use here. There's something called an escalation clause. And now you have to explain an escalation clause to them. Does anyone here not know what an escalation clause is? Speak up, raise your hand. Cool. Okay, several of you. Awesome, thank you. An escalation clause says, and I'll show you how to get to it. An escalation clause says, we, the buyer, are willing to offer more if you get another offer higher than ours. We're willing to increase our offer by this amount of money up to a maximum of this price. So in the case of a 750, there's a mosquito in my room, of a $750,000 house, I would recommend that you offered to go over the asking price by at least $5,000, but preferably $10,000. And here's why. If our offer has some things in it that aren't quite perfect, but it's a good offer, and another offer that's higher has everything perfect, and we're trying to beat that other offer, we want our price to overcome anything that is in our offer that doesn't suit the seller perfectly. So $5,000 more than the other asking, no, not really worth it. I really like this stuff here. $10,000 more, yeah, okay. Let's counter them and see if they'll give us what the other offer gives us, and let's counter them at the $10,000 higher price. Yeah, let's do it. Do you see what I'm saying? $10,000, it's going to get people's attention, right? So on a $400,000 condo, you don't want to offer $2,000 over the highest offer. You want to offer $5,000 over the highest offer. You want to make that number substantial enough. And then the max, well, that depends on the buyer and what they can afford and what they're willing to go to. So in our comps, we see the highest sale went to 785. So maybe they're willing to go to 790. They're at 750 starting, that's $10,000. That's $40,000 worth of increments that they're willing to go, right? So they might put $10,000 over any other offer to a max of 790, like that. That's an escalation clause. And so when and they work, they work, and we're using them a lot lately, especially here on Maui in this particular market. So you've explained that. You've now agreed to a pricing strategy. You want to agree to earnest money deposit, right? And talk about that. Same thing. Earnest money deposit, you can put $1,000 down, but $1,000 doesn't really say a lot about your intention to purchase this property. If you want to make a really strong statement about, we want this house, this is our dream house, and your total down payment, let's say, is going to be 10%, $75,000. So maybe you can offer 10 or 15 or maybe even $20,000 earnest money deposit, because this is the house you want. Now, if your buyer isn't so sure and says, well, it's a nice house, but I'm not that crazy about it, well, then they're on a $750,000 house on Maui, you should probably offer $10,000 earnest money deposit and another $10,000 at the completion of the inspection period. So for a total of $20,000 during the escrow period, and then they bring the rest before closing. Yes, Catherine.
Hi, sorry to interrupt.
No,
For
don't be
the
sorry.
escalation clause, do you put it in the initial purchase contract, or I mean initial offer, or do you do it when they counter offer back and said, hey, we have other offer that higher than yours?
You don't have a chance if you don't do it initially, because they're going to accept that higher offer. They're not going to come to you with an escalation clause. You need to go to them with an escalation clause.
So that's in the addendum of some source, right? Or later on?
No, we pull it in, we have it in our clause editor. I'll show you where ours is.
Okay, all
You'll
right.
have to ask your broker if you're in Honolulu.
Maui.
Oh, you're in Maui. So I'll show you where it is for Maui agents. For
Okay.
our Honolulu agents, I don't know if you've got it in your clause editor, but you can investigate and we'll get there. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right. So agreeing to all of the financial parts, right? And then you can send your clients off to have a coffee or hang up with them from the Zoom call, whatever you're on, and you're now going to do some work. Do not have your clients sit around waiting for you. Makes you so nervous. And it could take you a couple hours because you need to reach your broker, you need to call the lender, you need to do all sorts of stuff. So I'll get back to you later today. Why don't we make an appointment at 4 o'clock for you to sign this offer or whatever, right? Okay. So next you want to call the lender and you want to get an updated pre-approval letter or pre-qualification if that's all they have, but let's hope you got your clients to get pre-approved in this market, right? It's a very competitive market. Discuss other matters with the lender. So they're going to ask you how much you're offering. We're offering $750 with an escalation clause. So we need a pre-approval letter for $750. So I'm writing an offer for Marion Haller. Can I write her a 30-day offer? Oh, Marion Haller. Oh no. Marion is self-employed and she's given me some stuff. So yes, she's applied and I can give you a pre-approval, but I need a lot of documentation from her. So no, I don't feel comfortable with I'm going to need 45 days for this offer. So now some lenders are going to say to you, so you can make it a 30-day offer, but just put the 15-day extension in there and then we'll exercise the extension. And my advice to you is don't do that. And here's why. Nobody, particularly sellers and buyers, do not like exercising extensions. It pisses the other party off, right? So if you want a nice, smooth transaction, you're better off being honest and forthright upfront and say, Marion's going to need, well, maybe she doesn't need 40 days, 45. Can I do 40 days? Yeah, I can do 40 days with her. Yeah. If you help me get her to provide all the documentation and you say, I'm going to kick her ass and get her to send you everything you need. So she really wants this condo. She'll give you everything. So, okay, so you write it for 40 days, right? You don't have to write it for 45. You can write it for 38 days, right? You can write an offer for any time length that you think, you and the lender think you can get this done. And then there's a final little thing. There's on a pre-approval letter, it's fine because clearly they have checked the income. But on a pre-qual letter, you need to ask that question because there's a little puka in the contract that says, is the pre-approval letter based or pre-qualification letter based on the lender having checked this or not checked this? So you want to double check that with the lender. So that's not on the form. You'd need to ask the lender that, make a little note for yourself. All right, what else do you need to do? You need to pull the tax map record and permits for a single family residence to make sure that everything that you see there is there on an older property, right? We know that people add things and do things and there's no permits for them. And so your client needs to know that, you need to know that. And preferably you've done this before or while you're talking to your client. This should actually be further up in the process. Because if there are unpermitted elements, like if the tax record says, oh, this is a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and you've got a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with an enclosed deck. There's no enclosed deck on the tax record. That second full bath isn't on the tax record. Now you better go find out if that second full bath was permitted and was the enclosed deck permitted. And if they're not, now you've got potentially some issue with value. This house may not appraise. So now you have to talk to your client about that, right? And what is the consequence? And are they able to take a loan for less and put in more cash? Well, people who only have 10% down, there's not a lot of room there for them to bring additional money, right? Other people may have the ability to bring more money. So talking about what's permitted and what is the likelihood of this appraising is important. I've seen some deals, people make offers so far above what the comps say because they are desperate to get what they want. And then it doesn't appraise, of course. If you stay within the comps, like we have this one comp that sold at 785, if you go to 790, chances are it'll appraise, right? If you went to 810 or 820, it might not, because the comps are all in the 700 still. So pulling that tax record and finding out, making sure whatever is there is permitted is important. It's also important to read the listing. So be sure to read the whole listing and the realtor remarks. And you go like, I can't believe you have to tell us to do that. Well, you know something, you're so excited about writing an offer and you've got so much on your mind that the last thing we do is think to slow down enough and go, oh, I better read what it says here. And read that listing carefully. And sure enough, there's information about there that says the seller wants an as-is addendum, the seller is doing a 1031 exchange, and they want a certain escrow company. It's all right there, right? So if you don't read that, you wouldn't know that. So you got to read the listing, right? And then you want to call the seller's agent. Right? We want to call the seller's agent to be, again, sure about what's going on here. And the first thing you want to ask the seller's agent is the seller entertaining another offer or is one expected? Well, let's see. Yes, we've gotten one offer and I'm expecting two more. I had 2 second showings yesterday and the agents are telling me that they are going to be submitting an offer. Okay, cool. When is your seller going to be reviewing these offers? We are accepting offers until tomorrow at 5, and then we will get back to people on Saturday by 3 in the afternoon. So tomorrow at 5 is when the seller is going to consider the offers. Okay, so we will be writing an offer just to let you know. So I will be submitting that before tomorrow at 5. Hopefully tomorrow morning early. Now, if the seller's agent had said, no, we don't have another offer, no other offer, then you want to dig a little deep, right? You want to say, well, have you had a lot of showings? You know, a modest amount of showings, not a lot. Do you have showings scheduled for the weekend? No, I have no showings scheduled. Will you be doing an open house? Yes, I'll be doing an open house on Sunday. Okay, great. Can you see how that information would impact what price your clients might offer? Right? If there's another offer on the table, can you ask questions about that offer? Yes, you can, right? So can you tell me, do you have an offer at asking price? Yes, I do. Can you tell me, is it a cash offer? Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, now I'm competing with a cash offer at asking price. Wow. Does that offer have an escalation clause? Can you tell me that? No, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you anything more about the offer. So here's the thing. We ask as many questions as we can. I mean, we have the right to ask whatever we want to ask. There is no rule about what you can and can't ask. Although some seasoned agents are going to say to you, you can't ask me that. And the answer to that agent is, yeah, I can ask you. You just don't, it's up to you whether you answer it or not, right? Because every seller and agent are different. For instance, I'll give you an example. I talk to my sellers and I talk to them about, do you think it's to your advantage for me to tell people that there is an offer that's $20,000 over asking price? Or do you think it's more advantageous to you for me just to say, we have something over asking? And then agents will say, will you tell me how much over asking? And I can either say it's $20,000 over asking, or I can say it's significant and be vague, right? And now my seller and I can have this conversation, and my seller can decide, what is it? How should I answer that question? What is the best chance? Well, you can say that in order to beat a $20,000 offer, somebody might come with an offer $21,000 over asking, but chances not at $750, right? So now somebody might come with 25 or 30 over asking because they know what the threshold is. So on the other hand, it could also discourage someone from making an offer, right? They go, I don't want to go that high. I'm not making an offer. Now, that's up to your seller to decide, right? This is a worthwhile conversation if you're representing the seller. As the buyer, we're representing a buyer today. We can ask as many questions as we want and try to get the information. So don't be shy and don't let anybody put you off from asking questions. You want to learn as much as you can. All right. And again, you know something, I'm going to have to redo this because this needs to go up here too, right? The whole conversation about pricing now gets impacted by this information. So we just talk to our clients according to this form. This is not in the right order. So I am going to, I'm going to have to revise this, but you can also get the idea and maybe put numbers and go 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you do them in the proper order. You also want to ask, does the seller have any closing date timing needs? Yes, my seller is moving in 30 days. So the quickest closing, 30-day closing would be awesome. But my client has to leave in 30 days. Okay, well, Marion can't, but now I'm going to see if I can't make it, can I pressure Marion and say, Marion, the lender will do a 30-day closing for you if you get all your information in the next 3 days. Can you do that? Wow. Okay. That's a lot of work. Let's see. Yep. It's a weekend. And on Saturday, I can devote the entire day to getting him everything he's asking for. So let me find out if he's available on Saturday so I can check with him and get him everything. The problem is that putting the loan package together with the lender is one thing, but once it goes to underwriting has more questions, right? Now, underwriting is going to start asking for documents. So, Marion, do you get it that in a week, the underwriter is going to ask you for more stuff? Do you agree to do this instantly? And you go, okay, I really want this house. Yes, I agree to really pay attention and provide the lender instant. Now, if the client says, well, I work and I can't do everything and whatnot, if they start hedging like that, this is going to be a little bit of an issue, and making a tight closing is going to be tough. So you better stick to your 40 days and realize that your $10,000 over, in your escalation clause will hopefully justify that. But knowing what the timing needs are, what if the seller says, yes, my seller actually wants to stay in the unit for 60 days after closing. She's lived there forever. They've got a lot of stuff. They need some time. So they want a post-occupancy addendum. Okay. Is that okay with your buyer? And now you got to ask the buyer, are you willing to wait 90 days to move into this unit, right? Okay. So knowing that in advance, can you see if you just write a 45-day offer and you didn't know, your offer isn't right. Your offer doesn't appeal to the seller. Does everybody get that, right? Makes sense. Does the seller have any special questions? No? Okay. I don't check the chat. So if somebody puts a question, yeah.
I was just going to ask, in this scenario with like you're mentioning for a post-occupancy issue, that's something you should probably put in the first interviews with the client, wouldn't it be? Is like, would you be okay if the seller needs post occupancy? Do you want to address that to
No.
begin with, or do you want to
No.
as
So that's why I'm saying this entire section, call the seller's agent for special terms, should
Right.
be number 1. Do you see that? And number
yeah.
2 should be check your TMK, make sure that everything's legal.
right?
And then
But
you talk to your client about pricing, because then you know everything.
right,
So you don't need to talk about post occupancy addendum as a general rule, because it doesn't come up all that often.
okay, that was the root of my question. Okay,
I understand, and that's why I'm saying move the call the seller conversation up in terms of your priority. That should be your number 1 item that you do, and then check the TMK, make sure everything's legal and you think it's going to appraise, and then have the pricing conversation. Yeah. Good question. Are they offering to make any repairs? And the listing agent says, yes, we know that the garage door isn't working properly, so we will get that repaired. Woo, check. Awesome. I can go to my legal pad and I can say, we can address that. The seller's already agreed. That's fantastic. Anything else? Does the seller have an escrow company that they request? Right? Because it's not their job to choose the escrow company. And they go, yes, ABC escrow has done all the title work. And I then ask, well, by title work, do you mean that was there an issue with title that they had to help you fix? Well, no, but they provided a title report. I go, I understand that, but that's their marketing efforts. So is the seller tied to this escrow company? I'll try to convince the buyer to use them, but if they have their own requirement, I want to honor that. Well, yeah, I'd like to use this escrow company, right? So you will, it's like they don't have a right to call to dictate the escrow company. So if your buyer has a request and a desire to use a particular escrow company, you have a right to do that. And finally, will the seller be available to review the offer? Well, you've already found out he's going to review the offer Saturday and respond by 3 o'clock. So that's already answered. But sometimes you might not have gotten that information. So it's good to ask and make sure. Like if I want to make an offer, and there's no other offers around, and I want to get this offer answered in 24 hours, is the seller available for a quick turnaround? So if we ask for an answer by tomorrow, would that work for you? Yeah, that should work. Yeah, seller's available. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So now we've gotten all the information from the listing agent in regard to what special terms your client wants. Double check. Is there anything else, right? And now we want to write our contract and we want to be sure to read it over. Double checking your contract before you send it to your broker, and certainly before you send it to your client. Make sure there's no typos, make sure you've got everything set, make sure you've got it all right. And then your broker will review and your broker will provide you with comments and changes, right? If there's anything that needs to be changed. So, and then you need to send it back to your broker for signature and then send it for signature to your client. And your client and you should sit over Zoom and go over that contract, and they are on screen signing that contract while you're going over it, right? Answering any questions about the contract, etc. It is not good form to send a 14-page contract to somebody and say, I've sent you the contract to sign. Let me know when you've completed it, right? How would you feel if somebody sent you a 14-page contract for a $750,000 purchase and wasn't there with you to answer questions? So part of the exercise today is to learn the contract better so that you can do that more easily, and to encourage you, like this is actually a great thing to practice. You can practice on your dog. You can practice on your cat or your kids or your husband or best friend. Bring a bottle of wine and say, you can drink wine while I do this, right? But presenting the contract is a great exercise in learning what the contract is all about. So I encourage you to do that. All right, so that takes us to a purchase contract. And before we go there, we actually have to get in to the purchase contract, right? We have to get there. So I'm going to show you Yes, Anne.
I just wanted to make a comment about the escrow company. Usually the reason why a buyer would want to use the escrow company they know about is for a discount. So usually what I do is I just explain that to the listing agent and ask them if it would be okay for me to contact their escrow company to see if they would offer that same discount. And that usually just squashes everything, you know? So yeah.
Yes, it's true.
basically
And I
it.
have run into people that prefer a certain escrow company, right, or a certain title insurance company. So absolutely. What she's saying is most escrow companies will honor each other's discounts. So let's say your request to log in has expired due to inactivity. Continue. Oh, I see. That's my the escrow companies honor each other's offer of a discount. So if the buyer sold a house in California with ABC title and now gets a discount, and you want to go to XYZ title because the seller wants to go there, XYZ title will most probably honor that discount and offer the same discount. And they're doing that in order to get to get business, right? That's why they do that. So for sure. Thank you, Anne. Yes, that is true. I have to say, this is a pet peeve of mine. This bugs me. It is the buyer's right. It is the buyer's right to choose this, right? So you get to work, like we develop relationships, and I want to work with my favorite escrow officer. That's what I want to do. And I have a right to do that as a buyer's agent. And so with the marketing that the escrow companies are doing by offering title reports, they are circumventing this right? And it just annoys me. So never mind my pet peeve. You are absolutely right. Okay, so here is, this is the Maui login. So I just wanted to, I just want to log in here so we can get to zip forms. And however you guys get to zip forms, right? Our zip forms login is right here. And again, you want to be sure to teach, when you teach the Clarity dashboard, what your zip forms login information is, be sure to use the username provided from Keller Williams, right? You cannot, if you make up your own username, you will not be connected to our zip forms. All right, so here we are at zip forms, and while that's opening, I also need to get a listing. So we're going to write an offer on one of these new listings here. Just let me write down the MLS number. Okay, we're going to write an offer on a Cam Sands 394422. So I want the what do you call it? The MLS number, so that I can go into zip forms and connect to that MLS. That's why I want that. I believe, I don't know whether you can do that on the Big Island, but you'll have to figure that out. All right. So what do I do? Here I am in zip forms. The first thing I'm going to go do is go to new. I need a new transaction. And by the way, these are all transactions. Some of them are real. Some of them are, you know, for my Betty Buyer exercises or Sam Seller exercises. And you can look at them in these cards, or you can look at them as a list, right? Over here, you can switch this back and forth like that. So I want to open a new transaction for this buyer, right? So I'm going to hit new. And it asked me, what is this? A new listing or a new purchase? Well, it's a purchase. So I'm going to click that. And now I'm going to say that this is Cam Sands, and there's a unit number here. Cam Sands unit 8206. 8206. And this is for Betty Buyer. And I don't seem to do very well on the number sign thing, do I? There we go. Cam Sands 8206 for Betty Buyer. So that tells me that I'm going to be able to find that transaction again, right? So what is this? This is a condominium. This is an active transaction. You don't have this. You just go straight to select a template. So we're going to go right here. And when we click on these arrows, you should see all these global templates. Global meaning all of us get to see these. So I am looking for not a listing. And by the way, I could open a new transaction when I first start working with Marion as the buyer and sign a buyer broker agreement. So I just call my file Marion Haller or Betty Buyer and put the buyer broker agreement in there. And then I can always add a template for what I want, what she ends up buying, whether it's a house or a condo. I can add that later, and I'll show you how to do that. But right now we know we're writing an offer, so we are going to choose the right thing. Is she paying cash? No, she's buying a purchase contract. So this is a purchase contract condo financed. That's what we want to pull. That's the template. And now we can hit save. And it's going to open our transaction. And we are going to be working in this bar right here, as well as in each section, the light gray. So it's a very faint difference from the white, the light gray bar also. So we are in the summary page. And in that summary page, we can go right to the MLS right here by MLS Connect and connect to our MLS. So, oh yes, there's Hawaii Information Service or Maui. Oh, so I don't see Honolulu on there. So you'd have to know for yourself if you've got this link or not. And do you or don't you? You do. Okay, great. So what kind of listing is it? It is, you got to get this right. You got to fill this out right. It won't pull a condo listing if you say it's residential. So this is important. So the first thing is to pull the right island. And then it's a condominium. And now we're going to put in the MLS number. And my MLS number was 394422. And I want to include the photo. And now I say, find me that listing, please. Bingo. Cool. I scroll down and I say, import that puppy. And it says, do you want to replace existing data? I have no existing data. So I just say, yes, just do what you need to do. And look at this right here in my summary. There's my unit number. There is all sorts of information that comes up. Camp Sands comes up as a subdivision. That's kind of interesting, but hey, it comes up. That's good. Here's the street address, right? So, fantastic. Now I go to the next tab and I go to parties. And look at that. Karen Brown is the listing agent and Jerry Shannon is already filled in as the escrow officer because that's the escrow officer we recommend. For those of you on Maui, Jerry is awesome. I love working with her. And I don't say that because she's in there. She's been around a long time. I've known her for many years. She's great to work with. And to me, what makes a great escrow officer is one who answers, you can get them on the phone and helps you solve gnarly situations and works with you. That's what, to me, makes a really great escrow officer. And Jerry does that. And here I now need to go to selling agent and broker because that's me. So I'm going to open this. I guess I just click on it. Yeah, just click on it. And I'm going to put Mary, who's the selling agent. So Marion Haller is the selling agent. And what's my agent ID is my MLS ID number and my license number. And notice the system remembers them, right? So once you put them in once, maybe twice, it'll remember you. I'm the selling agent, right? And there's my phone number. That's all good. Now, who is my broker? I need to pull this person in, and Keone Ball is my broker. and the office ID is there, and Keone's email doesn't come up. So, oh, there it is. So if I just start typing it, there's Keone's email, and that's it. That's what I need. So now I save. And now I've got both myself and my broker connected to this transaction so that when I go for e-signature, his name should pop up, right? And now if I know the seller's name, I enter it, but I do not do that from the tax record. And the reason is that, you know, I want to make sure I'd rather wait until the seller speaks to us and gives us documents back and we get the official name for the seller. The tax record messes it up sometimes. And so I do not fill in sellers' names until they correspond with us. So that's all I need right now. And that takes me to the next section called documents. And I know I've pulled a template when there are documents in my documents folder. If your documents folder comes up blank, you go, oops, I forgot to pull a template. Okay, that's as obvious as that. If you were to go to all forms up here, those would not be templates. Those would be blank forms. So in order for you to now pull a template, let's say this were blank, there's a template, apply template button right here. See that? And you can click that right here and you can pull the condo financed, right? You could pull it right now and apply it. So numerous places where you can add your templates, never too late. All right, that takes us to our purchase contract. So you can see here, it is filled in with our company name. That's part of the template. And having pulled the MLS, my tax map number is filled in, the address is filled in. What does not pull through is the condo name. So I have to fill that in. And I also have to fill in the unit number. The unit number does not get pulled through in the right place. So I always have to do that. Whoops, that's the wrong number. It's number 6. I have to do that. Oh, that is the wrong. I can't see my keyboard here. Don't know why. There we go. So it's important to do that. You know, the tax map key identifies it, but it's really nice to have a complete address, right? Going back to the top of the form, who's reviewing this? Well, my broker is Keone Balls, so Keone should be here. And I try to always use his name with his title, right? With the function. He's a BIC. He's not a PB, he's a BIC. So, and it's not just any name, not just Keone Ball. We want his title there. And then this is where his signature is going to go. The next category is the purchase contract reference date. This is the date. It doesn't have any other function except the contract will forever be referred to by this date. We don't use the acceptance date. We use this purchase contract reference date. So if my client is planning to sign this document today, I'm going to date it today. If my client calls me this afternoon and says, oh, Marianne, something came up, can we meet tomorrow morning? No problem, we can meet tomorrow morning. Do I have to cancel my e-signature and redo this date? No, I do not, right? So if I draft a contract today, put today's date, and my client signs it tomorrow, that is okay. Anne, you have a question? She's not even there. No, must be an old question. All right. Now notice the listing brokerage name got pulled in. Woo, how nice is that? It's so useful. And our template already has these X's included and our company name here. And the MLS system pulled in the fact that it's a Caldwell Banker Island Properties listing. So this is cool. Obviously, if this were a dual agency, and you would see Keller Williams Realty Maui up here, the system doesn't know to convert that to dual agency. You would now have to blank out all of these names and these X's and make these NAs and turn this into an X and put Keller Williams Realty Maui here under dual agency. When you do dual agency, you are not the buyer's broker and in dual agency. No, you are only in dual agency. You cannot be the buyer's agent the way single agent agency is defined. You can only perform the duties of dual agency. So only this would apply. In some cases, you might have a customer, you might make an offer on a FSBO. In that case, your seller would be here and not up here, right? Your seller has no agency representation, and that would be here. And it tells you, for example, for sale by owner, right? So that would go here. All right. And when you review a contract with people, I just want to point out that it's really cool to read this section to your client. So I just want you to notice, if you were the buyer and I were reviewing this contract, I would say to you, so agency is really important, and that's why it's on the front page, because you must acknowledge the agency relationship before you sign a contract. That's why it's on the first page. And I just want to point out to you what it says about a buyer's agent, because I am your agent, right? So the brokerage firm represents the buyer only unless a disclosed dual agency exists, and we're not in dual agency. So the buyer's agent, that's me, owes the highest duties to the buyer, including confidentiality, loyalty, due care, and diligence. So those are parts of the fiduciary responsibility. I want you to know I take those really seriously, and that's what this is about here. So, and that's why it's on the front page. Any questions? But see how that makes you feel? When somebody reads that to you, when somebody reviews that and says, that's really important for me to read this to you so that you're aware that I take this very seriously. Loyalty, confidentiality, care, and diligence, right? Very important. Okay. All right, that takes us to earnest money deposit. Any questions on this section? Nope. All right. Earnest money deposit. We have 3 options here, and we do not fill these in for you. You have to fill these in. Option 1 is that you receive a check. There are still people who want to send you a check. If you do a check, I highly recommend you create a file folder for this transaction, print out the purchase contract so that you can easily refer to it and find it. You put a check in a little envelope, you close it, you write the client's name on it, and you staple it to the left side of your file folder, right? Just staple it right in on the inside of your file folder so that you've got it in a safe and secure place. It's not in your wallet or in your car's glove box. This is where it should be. And then if you've got that check, if the offer is accepted, you of course have to take that check within 24 hours to escrow. The second option is that the buyer will directly deliver the payment to escrow the next business day after acceptance. So same kind of time frame, and buyers really like that. They like not writing you a check. They like the involvement. They like going to the escrow company, maybe meeting the escrow officer. People like that. So I see that a lot as the option. And the third option is that the buyer is going to wire transfer the deposit. And we usually give buyers 3 days to do this. And notice it says 3 business days. And we do that so that, you know, just in case there's a hiccup or something. And escrow actually has to open escrow and create the account so that they can receive the money and notify the buyer through a secure website that the buyer has to sign into in order to transfer these funds and get the account number of where to transfer it to. So that's why you want to give them at least 3 days to do that. All right. Anne, I was just asking, you don't have a question, right? Because your hand's still up. Okay. No, you want to take it down. Take your, yeah, thanks. All right. Offer to buy. C1 is, this is an offer to buy. And this contract shall be binding if accepted by seller on or before. So we know that the seller is not looking at this until Saturday. So we're going to give them from Saturday, and probably I would give them until 5 or 4 p.m. because they're going to you know, get back to us by 3, so give them an extra hour, but yeah, that should be plenty. And now we've got our purchase price, right? So now we fill this in and we say, okay, what do you want to do here? And Betty says, well, I want to really come on strong. So I want to put $20,000 down. Wow. Okay, Betty, you go. You really want this property. So just for your information, you can tab your way through this form, right? So if I tab, it takes me to the next puka. However, I'm going to warn you, some pukas are date fields, and what is written in there in our pre-filled template will disappear and a date will go there instead. And this is one of these places. This is actually a date field that has been converted to an alpha field. And so I'm going to tab there just to show you what you do in the event that you do that. So she says, all right, I'm going to bring another $10,000 when I'm done with my inspection period. Okay, now look what I've done. I've tabbed, I'm in this date field, and I go, oh shit, now, oops, oh dear, now what do I do? So the first thing you want to do is quickly write down the sentence, and you go 2 business days after acceptance of J1 inspection period. Okay, you write that down. And now when you get out of it, you get this funky date, right? So you got to go in there, you got to delete the date, and now you have to hit the space bar. And when I hit the space bar, oh dear, the date comes back, but I now get a different color field telling me that I can now write into this field. So to change the nature of a field, when it wants a number and you want to put a letter in there, or vice versa, you need to hit the space bar. Okay, so what was the sentence? 2 business days after acceptance of J1 inspection period. Look at that. And now get out of there. Okay, my alarm has just gone off and I need to just go do something. I'll be right back. Okay. All right, so now notice what it says here, 10 plus 20. So it's telling us the 30, right? It does the math for us, which is great. So now I got to get into the next puka. And this is the balance of the down payment, or the balance of the whole purchase price if somebody's paying cash. That's to be paid into escrow prior to closing. So this is 30 and she's got 75, right? So we're going to put in $45,000 here is what she needs to bring. And so that it does the math for us. And now she's offering, what is she offering? $750, right? So she needs a loan of $675, right? Let's see if that works, because it does the math for us. And yes, it does. There's our $750. And this is filled in for you, conventional financing at prevailing rates and terms. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to mention right here that see section Q for escalation clause. I like to let them know right up front that we are offering an escalation clause. And now, in order to deal with that and not forget about it, I might just scroll forward to section Q right now so that I don't forget, and add the escalation clause. So here we go. I'm going to show you how to pull and go to the clause editor and get a clause. Everybody ready? I've got my cursor in section Q. I'm going to put in Q-1 because I have to number all of these items. And I'm going to hit the pencil, little pencil icon. And then I'm going to hit the little paper icon. See the paper icon? And that takes me to all the clauses that are in our clause editor. I'm in section Q here. Notice you can also get clauses for other sections, but I want section Q. And the clause title, look at all the clauses that we have in here. Here is the escalation clause. Buyer is aware and understands that there are or could be multiple offers on this property. Should seller receive a bona fide offer prior to the acceptance of this contract at a net offer price, excluding any seller concessions to buyer, higher than this offer, buyer hereby agrees to increase his offer price to an amount equal to, and this is where we said 5,000, 10,000, whatever, more than the highest competing offer up to a maximum offer price of, and we were going to put what, 790 or something. Seller agrees to provide buyer with a copy of any such offer for verification. And I hit insert. And now it's here. And now I take the, put my cursor here, right? And I take these lines out and I add $10,000. And I take this line out and I add $790,000. Okay, now it doesn't fit all in here. The system is automatically going to create an addendum where the sentence continues. And by next week or 2 weeks, right, when we're going to get a revised purchase contract that's going to give us more lines again so that it'll fit. Okay, so now I've got my escalation clause, so I can go back up to where I was. Where was I? Okay, I was on page 2. Okay, so I have my offer set here. All right, addenda. Notice everything is filled in as NA. Now, do we need any addenda for this offer? Anybody remember? What did the listing say? What does the listing say? I wonder if the listing says anything. Seller will be reviewing all offers by 5 p.m. on Saturday. Oh my gosh, how did we know? Look at that, it's right there. All offers must be submitted with a pre-approval letter and or proof of cash funds to be considered by the seller. Variable rate commission applies if listing agent procures the buyer. Information contained herein deemed reliable, however, not guaranteed. Buyer and buyer's agent to do their own due diligence. Well, okay, this is a condo. Let's hope that's just her standard verbiage. Available to show is subject to vacancy between vacation rental bookings. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I understand pre-approval letter, but how would you show proof of cash funds?
Copy of a statement.
That would work. That's it.
Well, that's what you're going to provide for proof of cash funds 3 days after acceptance when you offer to provide proof of cash funds, right? Is a statement. However, if you're going to transfer or send a statement for your client, be sure to cross out the account number, but leave their name. And that's why it can't be a screenshot, because screenshots of balances don't show names, and you need something with the client's name on it.
Okay. Have you ever come across somebody that is literally cash, not in a bank account?
Yes. And in order to purchase that property, the person is going to have to deposit the funds.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that ends up being an interesting conversation, and this has gotten harder and harder over the years, right?
Yeah.
So the last time I did this was about 20 years ago, and I found a lender who was willing to work with the client. But it's gotten harder and harder, and people need to figure out how to deposit their money.
Okay.
Not for me to judge, right? We are not the arbiters here. All right. So all of these are filled in and we are asked, what were we asked to do? No, just that the offer is due Saturday at 5, which we want to go back up here. And I said Saturday at 4. So this needs to get moved to Sunday, right? They're not going to decide Saturday at 5. They're just taking offers. Is that what she said? Seller will be reviewing all offers by 5 p.m. on Saturday. Yeah, so we want to give them a little extra time to respond. So I'm going to give them until like noon on Sunday. Okay, does that make sense? Right? Because people do this, they tell us when the buyer is going to review by, and then they don't say, and we'll get back to you by what time, right? So I could even make this 3 p.m. and just make it, I have nothing to lose, and give the listing agent some time to prepare whatever they've got to do to get back to everybody. Okay, now, what if they ask for an as-is addendum? I need to remember that, right? So here's a habit to get into. This is so good if you do this. And we tend to not do this because we think we're in a rush and we got to do this now and whatever. No, you want to get it right. So literally review this list. You go, is this a 1031 exchange? No. Agreement of sales? No. As is. Wow. Why don't we offer an as-is addendum? We didn't talk about that, but why don't we do that? Because that'll make our offer stronger. So, and the condo is in great shape. So I'm gonna put an as-is in here. Is it distressed? No. Dual agency? No. Early occupancy? Oh yes, Light. We have this early, no, not early occupancy, sorry. FHA? No. Lead-based paint? When was this built? 1983. No, we're okay. We're okay. So not a lead-based paint. Oceanfront property? No. Plain language? No. Post-closing occupancy? Yes, I need the post-closing occupancy because she told me the seller wants an additional 60 days, right? So we've got to check that. So now I've checked that. What else? Purchase money mortgage? No. Residential leasehold property? No. Short sale? No. VA financing? No. Okay. So now I've got 2 addenda. Guess what? I will forget to add those addenda if I don't do it right now, right? So I'm going to go up to forms over here on the right, the big blue button called all forms. And I'm going to pull the as is condition addendum. And there it is. It's going to get added. And then I'm going to go down to the post-closing occupancy. Go to P for PP, post-closing occupancy. And I'm going to add that. Okay. And then all I have to do is click in the gray and it pops up. And it takes me to the last form that I've added. So I go, okay, that's great. I'll deal with that later. Right now, I want to finish the purchase contract. So I'm going to hit the back button, right? Back and forward are always in the system, not your browser back button, this back button in the top left. Okay, so I've got all of my documents here. This is good. I'm going to go back to the purchase contract. Okay, I got my addenda. All right, this is good. Now on the description of the property, it's going to put in the address again, and then it's going to say all of that certain fee simple or leasehold. This is a fee simple property, so we need to check that. And then we go, this, what is this? This is a 1-2, a 1-2 for $750,000. Oh my God. All that certain 1 bedroom, 2 bath, condominium in, and I have to take out the word condo name and put in comma Ole Sands together with 2 assigned parking stalls. Now, how would I know that? I'd need to call the agent, or they would have told me that when we were at the showings. So 2 assigned parking stalls, and then it goes on to say, and a proportionate interest in the limited and in the common and limited common elements per the deed. And that too right now is going to get added to the addendum that this form creates, and in 2 weeks, we're going to get more lines back and all of our property descriptions will fit here. Just so you know. So that's the property description. Notice I don't say the size of the unit by square foot. We don't even need to do that anymore. The MLS does it. There's nothing we can do to change it. It doesn't change. You might want to do the size of a unit in a single family home, but for sure we do the size of the land in a single family home, right? So that description is a little different. Yeah. All right. And now we go to our listing and we notice here all of these inclusions. See the inclusions here? This is a good listing agent. They put all the inclusions in. Lots of listing agents lately are skipping this. So blind, ceiling fan, chandelier, dishwasher, dryer, drapes, furnished, inventory, kitchenware, linens, microwave, range, refrigerator, smoke and heat detectors, cable TV, and washing machine. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go, it's central air, because this is Camp Sands and you would know this. And now again, I can tab through, right? And go NA, tab, cable TV, X, tab, ceiling fan, tab. Do you see what I'm doing? This is cooktop is an NA. Dishwasher, did it say there was a dishwasher? Dishwasher, yes, there is. You get the idea. This is what you have to do, right? Is there a disposal? She didn't say there was a disposal. So I'm going to say NA. Whoops. But, oh, I'm in caps. I see what I did. And then dryer, yes, there was a dryer. And existing window coverings, yes. Right? I got to go through this just like this. I got to, and these tend to follow alphabetically the exact alphabetical order of these things. So you must put an NA to what is not applicable, and you must put an X what is applicable. And you will get countered on this if it's not accurate. So you don't want a counter offer. You don't want to delay. You don't want to make your, you want to make your offer as perfect as possible. So you want to get this right. Okay. So that's the process. I'm going to stop there because you get the idea. Yeah. All right.
When
No
it says
questions?
existing window, does it just mean that the unit has windows?
No, it says
Covering,
existing
window
window
covering.
coverings.
Oh, okay, got it. I was like, wow.
That's a good
So,
one. Yeah,
Marianne-
and she did say blinds, right? The blinds were included.
Yeah, she did.
Right?
She
So
did.
that's why I'm saying existing window coverings. Yeah.
Quick question also. I noticed it says photovoltaic system owned. What if it's not owned and it's only leased
Right here.
in the other?
So
Okay.
what's the difference? If it's an owned appliance, and you could consider a PV system kind of an appliance, right? If it's owned, it's a fixture. It comes with the property. That's what all of these things are. They're owned. They come with the property, right? If it's leased, it doesn't, right? Because if it's leased, the buyer has to apply to the leasing company to take over the lease. I just recently had a transaction with an agent where the buyer didn't qualify. They barely qualified for the house, and the leasing company said, no, we're not transferring this. So that's the difference here. The buyer would have to apply, right? It says right here, if buyer does not terminate the contract based on the information, then buyer shall apply for transfer of service within 3 business days after buyer's approval of the documents.
So in that
Now-
situation, what happens? Does the PV system company come take the system out, or does the contract get canceled at that point?
The buyer only has the choice of canceling the contract or transferring. There is no obligation by a seller to have the PV system removed. It costs
Okay.
a lot of money, and to end a lease costs a lot of money, just like it does with a car lease, right? It's not, you don't get out of this lease. Like, you have to buy your way out. And no seller is willing to buy $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 out of a lease because the buyer doesn't qualify. I would cancel the contract and relist my property. So now what else is here is that this does say contracts or leases, right? So it says seller shall provide applicable documents, including most recent statements for any of the following: leased, energy purchase photovoltaic agreement. Now this is the MECO agreement or the HECO agreement, right? And at what rate the electricity is being billed, etc. So you can use this and ask for owned PV system warranty and purchase contract, right? You just want to see evidence. So I would, if there were a PV system, I would check this as well and put in other owned PV system purchase contract and warranty. Okay, so you get the idea. This needs to be filled out as accurately as you possibly can. If you don't have filled in on the listing, if somebody didn't fill in inclusions, you got to call the agent and get them. And if you can't reach the agent, then you go by the pictures. You do the best you can, go by the pictures, so that you try to list as accurately as possible. If there is a PV system, you would probably give the seller 7 days to provide you with the documentation, and you would want 10 days to review it, because you're going to want to call the leasing company. You're going to want to do some investigating. So give yourself time, or give your buyer time. All right. And then we've got inclusion of furnishings. Now notice in our template for a condo, these are pre-filled. And the reason it's pre-filled is because most condos we sell are vacation rental condos, and therefore furniture is included. So the way we have it filled out is, first of all, it's X'd in the margin, right? That's important. You got to always do that. And then we say that a list is to be provided to the buyer within 7 days after acceptance. And then the buyer is going to have 7 days to review that list. And then the buyer can either cancel, or, sometimes there's a little back and forth. I don't understand you. Is this included? Is this not? Is this clear? Like, some people don't provide lists anymore. They provide pictures and they just say everything. So now you've got a fussy buyer, and the fussy buyer says, I want to make sure that they don't take anything out. So could you please go to the unit and count everything? Okay, so now you got to work with the listing agent and count everything, right? The things we do. Sometimes there's things that need to specifically be excluded. In condos, this often comes up and it says all the artwork is excluded, or the brand new king size bed is excluded, or some things will come up here. And so you want to put those in. You want to know what those are. Hopefully the agent has told you, so that your buyer, so that you don't set this expectation. If you forget to put exclusions, you get to final walkthrough and the thing is gone, and your buyer says, what? Right? And it wasn't clear. So you want to be very clear on inclusions and exclusions. Closing date is set for 45 days from acceptance. Obviously, you can go in here and change that. This particular line is an alpha field, so you can just go in and change that to, we're going to make it 40 days, right? And then the next line is filled in for a 15-day extension. This is where the buyer and seller agree to give each other a unilateral right to extend the contract once. Either party may exercise this extension without requiring approval from the other party once. So if the buyer exercises the extension, the seller can't now exercise another extension. So it's just one time. And you can change this, like a buyer says, that looks like a long time. Let's not ask for 15 days. Let's just ask for 10 days. You can do that, right? That's totally, like, it makes the maximum 50 days here, and that could be more attractive. Or some buyers are, you know, they're hard. I want 21 days. I want to close. I want the unit. No, nothing, no time. So you undo this, make this not applicable, take the 10 out, and you say time is of the essence, and you check that. Your escrow officer, ours is pre-filled for Jerry. We recommend you give her a try. Prorations and closing adjustments. Prorations are things like, and it says right here, right? What is it? Escrow shall prorate the following, if applicable, as of the date of closing. Real property tax. So the seller pays the property tax up until closing, and then the buyer pays the balance. Now, our property tax is paid twice a year. So the seller will have paid the property tax for a 6 month period going forward. So if halfway through that period this closes, they're going to get half of their tax payment credited from the buyer, and the buyer pays those taxes. The same thing is true for rents, right? If there's rents, now on a vacation rental, obviously not, but on rents for if there's a tenant in the unit. Interest on assumed obligations. This doesn't have, you can assume a loan, but it happens very rarely. So insurance is usually canceled and the buyer gets their own insurance. So that doesn't happen, but tenant rents does. And maintenance, right? Maintenance fees on a condo are paid in advance, and the seller has paid their maintenance fee, and now they get a credit from the buyer, and the buyer will have paid for their portion. Private sewer or water systems, right? And association dues, right? So all those things, and escrow knows to do that. The only thing that they don't transfer and deal with here, because it's not prorated, is the security deposit for a tenant. And that we recommend you do outside of escrow, just so the buyer gets an actual check that they can deposit into a new bank account to hold. All right, prorations and then closing costs. This is a very handy area where you can review the closing costs with either your buyer or seller. And the only thing missing from the buyer side is the insurance. Insurance is not listed here, and insurance can be a pretty hefty cost. Now, on a condo, not so much, because the maintenance fee includes the insurance for the property and the building. You only need to, or your buyer only needs to insure the actual condo. So the insurance expense tends not to be so high on condos, but a person taking on a new policy is going to have to pay 15 months of insurance initially for a 12-month deposit, and then they pay 3 months in advance for the actual coverage. Now, insurance companies are great at providing refunds if you cancel a policy, so the seller will get a refund for the policy that they're going to cancel. Notice of conveyance tax. Conveyance tax is paid by the seller. However, it depends on how the buyer is going to use the property. So if the buyer is the principal residence, then the conveyance tax is lower. If the buyer is going to use it as other than a principal residence, as an investment, right, and rent it out, the conveyance tax is going to be higher. The conveyance tax also increases as the prices increase. So it is not a number that we can tell people. It pertains to the seller, not the buyer. The only obligation we have is to notify them whether or not the buyer is going to be the principal resident or not. The rate is higher for the seller if they are an investor. So if the buyer fills out, oh, I'm going to own it, and then changes their mind during escrow, they have 15 days to change their mind. If they change their mind after these 15 days, then the difference in the taxes due will be their cost. That cost will become the burden of the buyer for having made their change of mind so late. And then we go to assessments. And assessments, there are several paragraphs here, and believe it or not, this little funny section is pretty important. An assessment is this. Can anybody describe an assessment? You know what it is? What would be an assessment?
It's like if you're part of a condominium and they discover that they have to replace like the roofs or whatever, and they haven't set aside money for this. So it's like an extra charge that you would have to pay on top of your HOA.
Right. Now, all condominiums have are required to have done a reserve study, because you can't borrow money on a building that doesn't have a reserve study. A reserve study says, here's what the expenses you can expect to incur over the next 20 years. And so you should be collecting $125 every month from every condo owner, and you should put that in a fund and hold it so that 5 years from now, when your roof needs to be replaced, you've got the money in the bank to replace the roof, right? Or the parking lot needs to be repaved, or whatever needs to be done. Those kinds of things are already being dealt with through the reserve study and the maintenance fee. What comes up is suddenly the pool springs a leak. Oh my God. And they have to drain the pool and hire a pool repair company, and the motor died, and goodness knows, and there's an additional $30,000 charge, and they now have to pay for that. They didn't count on the pool. The pool wasn't supposed to have this kind of maintenance until 8 years from now. So they need to deal with that now. And homeowners associations have this often because the gates break. Oftentimes these fancy gates that they put into these, gated communities aren't made for our sea air, and they corrode and they break pretty easily. And before you know it, the association has to replace a gate far sooner than their reserve study called for. So those would be additional assessments. Now, when you see a listing, the assessments are really built into the maintenance fee, and it's hard for us to actually know if there is a special assessment being paid or not. Sometimes the agent makes it known, but oftentimes they do not. So since we don't know, we fill this section out as follows. If there is a lump sum assessment that has been levied against the property prior to the acceptance date, in other words, it was a minor repair and everybody just needs to pay $1,000 by May 1. And this is known. We say the seller should pay that. Seller, you take care of it at closing, get rid of it. We don't want to take on a lump sum assessment that you should pay. If, however, an assessment has been levied against the property prior to the acceptance date, which is being paid in installments over time, we say that assessment should be prorated, because number one, you don't actually know anything about it. Number two, the seller has paid for their time, and now the buyer is going to pay, and the buyer is going to get the benefit of whatever was done. The buyer is going to get the benefit of that. So the fair thing to do here is to prorate. Now, the only exception that I would allow here is if an agent says to me, Marion, that assessment is complete in 3 months. So it's just got 3 months of payments left. Now I say, great, let the seller pay it off. But I have had sellers go into shock when they accepted an offer that said the seller shall pay, and on their closing statement, a $20,000 bill suddenly appears. And they go, what's this $20,000? And they go, well, you agreed to pay the assessment off. I go, no, I didn't. Yeah, you did. It's this little X right here is a big deal. So as the buyer's agent, I encourage you to do the fair thing, which is to mark prorated. The third item here, C, section C says, if an assessment is levied against the property during the escrow period, the seller is obligated to notify the buyer, and that becomes later discovered information as per the seller's disclosure section, and gives your buyer a right to assess and cancel the contract if they don't want to take this on. if people are like this at their budget, and then suddenly $150 charge gets added to the maintenance fee, they can't afford it. They can now say, I need to back out. I need to cancel. I can't afford this. This is too rich for me, right? So, yeah. Okay, I'm noticing there's a lot of chats that's saying, anybody have any questions here that I should know about, or you're just sharing stuff? All right, please speak your questions so I don't get caught in the chat. All right. Consents, you really only need to worry about a consent on an agreement of sale requires a consent, and the homeowners association, condominium association, there's a transfer fee for transferring the ownership, and then the documentation at the homeowners association or the condo association. If you take over a loan or leasehold property would require a consent. Risk of loss, good sentence to always read to your client. Risk of loss passes to the buyer upon closing. When is closing in Hawaii? On the day of recordation, morning of recordation at 8:01 a.m. You own the property, and we will notify you in the morning when it's recorded, and your insurer will know to have the insurance be active as of recordation. And keys to the property, keys must be passed. So if you sell something in an area that doesn't always have keys, like where I live in Haiku, and I've sold plenty properties that didn't have keys, and I have to have the locksmith come and rekey the exterior doors so we can pass keys. And that takes us to title. So the preliminary title report, we can expect this within a few days, right? Like 5 days. 5 days after acceptance, you should see a title report. The buyer then has 7 days to review this, and this is how we pre-fill our contract. 7 days to review it. Now, if you're writing a 21-day escrow, you're gonna want to shorten some of these, right? Because this is pretty tight. So maybe you give the seller 5 days to fix it, and maybe you take 5 days to review the, so you can just go into the number field and put a different number, right? If you need to shorten the time frames. So the second paragraph gives the seller an opportunity to fix anything if there is some cloud on title or some irregularity. Vesting and tenancy refers to, what does vesting and tenancy mean? Anybody tell me?
How the buyer's going to take tenancy, like tenants in common or joint tenants.
Exactly. So people might ask you questions about that. What do you do when somebody says, what does that mean? What is, you've got a married couple and they want to understand what kind of tenancy they should take.
I'm going to stay in my lane and refer them to somebody else.
Nice answer. Yeah, and you want to refer them to escrow. I actually keep, escrow does these nice charts that says, here's the basic fundamental differences between these tenancies. And so I keep one of those handy. You might even find one in the buyers section of our shared drive. And you can pass them that and tell them, if you have any questions, please call escrow. But actually escrow is going to ask you to speak to your attorney, because this is about how, in case you die, how is this land or this property going to be transferred, right? And so that's out of our lane, as you call it. So you really need to speak to your attorney about that. But sometimes the chart is just helpful enough. Like one of the things that's unusual in Hawaii, we have tenancy by the entirety, which is for married couples. Well, other states don't have that. So it's much like a joint tenancy, but there might be, a few differences, and they need to understand that. So the buyer has 15 days to notify escrow of tenancy, and there is no penalty for missing this date. However, on a short transaction, you want to shorten this because escrow cannot draw up the deed without this information. And this really is the information that a buyer provides when they get the escrow documents and escrow contract from escrow when they initially open escrow. So you want to follow up with this. And I actually prefer to make this 10 days. I think 15 is way too long. And it reminds me too, to get them to sign those documents, right? Because people don't pay as much attention to the escrow documents as they should. All right, that takes us to lending. And we start out with cash, right? What are the cash funds? So Betty has $75,000 cash that she's purporting to put towards this purchase. So in this instance, she's got that, it's in her account. And the question you want to ask Betty is, Betty, tell me, is this money in a checking or savings account in your name? Now, the reason I ask that is because if Betty says, well, no, I've got it in the stock market, then I go, oops, I'm going to put NA here, and I'm going to put an X on contingency. Because what just happened to the stock market this week?
It's drop.
It's down.
Yeah.
It's down, isn't it? And if Betty had exactly $75,000, how much might she have today?
45.
Well,
Yeah.
let's hope it wasn't that bad.
Depends
Drop
on
by
what you were.
10% on some of them.
It depends on what she was invested in, right?
Yeah.
But she might be down to 60, and all of a sudden she can't do her down payment, right? So we want to give her a contingency and say that she's going to withdraw her funds from an investment as opposed to providing it here, right? Now, the thing even about an investment is that she needs to provide proof of that investment within 3 or 5 days. So if we put 5 days here, she's going to have to show a statement. Well, if she can show last month's statement, because that's the only statement she has, the one for, you know, whatever her period is, it isn't going to show today's balance yet. So she can probably show a statement of 75,000. But we still have this contingency that if she can't ultimately provide that cash because it's an investment, she can cancel this contract. Buyer may elect to terminate this purchase contract pursuant to 02. Right? Get their money back. So that's how we protect our clients. To go back up here, if she has all the cash and it's in a checking account in her name, then we would say verification of cash funds, and we would leave the days in here, right? I'll provide that in 3 days. I like 3 and 2. We've got it filled into 5. I don't know why it would take anybody so long, but whatever you want to do. And bank statement is the most normal, even if it's in a money market account and she's got it sitting in cash in her money market account, that's fine. Just get the statement and be sure to cross out, right? So I finally broke down recently and I am now subscribing to Adobe so that I can do these things in Adobe, right? As opposed to having to print it out, cross it out and scan it back in and da, 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 da. So
What happens if somebody is given a gift of funds from like their godfather or something?
Okay, so that's right here is obtaining gift funds. See that? That's an option for your contingency. So now you would have to provide evidence of that in 5 days. What would you provide as evidence of that?
Proof of deposit.
The letter that the person gifting to the buyer.
You need a gift letter.
Yeah.
And the gift letter needs to say, what is a gift letter? A gift letter says, I agree to gift Betty Buyer $50,000. And it's a gift. It's not a loan, and I don't expect repayment. And here's a copy of my bank statement, and I will transfer that money to her 10 days prior to closing, something like that. Right? So, because, you know, I'm her cousin and I don't want to transfer it to her until she's sure she's buying. Right? So I'm not going to transfer it right away. I'll transfer it a little later. So I would provide the gift letter and then the statement from me, the person signing the gift letter, bank statement without the account number, showing the balance that I've got this money to gift her.
So just to clarify, I'm noticing that none of these say business days. So is this business or calendar days in H1 and
The
2?
entire contract is for calendar days. The entire contract, unless it says business days. So the only thing that's required for business days is when the escrow is involved or when the bank is involved, right? So you can't get a pre-approval letter on a Saturday. But you can approve, you can provide this documentation on a Saturday.
Okay.
Nothing's stopping you from getting your statement, or right? All those things are possible on a Saturday. So same here, right? This is proof of cash funds, a copy of Betty's bank statement, and then the seller has 2 days to review that and say, I need some more evidence or something, whatever. Yeah. So what else can we do here? So we've got the withdraw from an investment, or we've got the gift letter, those two. But the first one here is the sale of buyer's property located at. So what if Betty has a property located in California, right? So it's 123 Main Street in Fresno, right? Currently in escrow, closing January 29th. Just like that, right? And you could, like, even better, you could provide evidence of that with your offer, right? You could show the closing statement from this sale, right? Because the closing statement is going to show how much she has to pay off and what her profit is going to be. So a closing statement is best. If it's not in escrow yet and you don't have a closing statement yet, you would show your tax record that shows you own it, and maybe your mortgage statement showing that you only owe $200,000 and you've got it listed for $350,000, right? So that you can demonstrate this profit. Make sense? Now, as the selling agent, as the listing agent, I might want to contact that escrow officer. So I would, as a buyer's agent, always provide either the realtor's or the escrow officer's contact information, name and contact information, so that I can call and verify that this is in fact happening. Okay. And then withdrawal from a home equity line. Also not totally uncommon. So what this means is that usually it means that people have a home equity line on their home in California, and they're going to use that home equity line to purchase the property here. Or it could mean that they still have to apply for that home equity line. So as the agent, you want to verify this. Are you just applying? Because now they're really applying for 2 loans, right? And there's no contingency on obtaining this home equity line here. You could write a contingency into other and say home equity line pre-approval is attached and closing date is estimated to be, right? And you can provide more information if requested. Again, verifying that they have so much equity in their house that they can afford to do this. But oftentimes people sneak this in without wanting a contingency. So as long as they understand they can't get out of this deal because their home equity line didn't get approved, right? It's a tough one. Although the financing clauses are kind of weak, so if ultimately they cannot come up with the cash, yes, they can still get out. So it's tricky. And you want to just ask your clients lots of questions if they were to tell you they're going to use a home equity line. No problem if they've already got it, right? And that's really the easy way. All right. Financing contingency is checked. And this is, of course, this says the buyer shall get a loan and use this condo that she's buying as the collateral. And then H4 says, well, here are the due dates that correspond to this loan. And within 5 days, we're going to give you a pre-qualification letter. Now, Betty's got a pre-approval letter. And why is this in here? Because we've provided one already. Well, because what if the price ends up being $775 and now we need a revised pre-approval letter, right? So that's what this is about. And here's that little checkbox that is the pre-approval or pre-qual letter that's being presented with or without review of income supporting documentation. And then buyers obligated to provide a conditional loan approval 15 days prior to closing. This is another one of these fields that is a date field. So if you put your cursor here, you're going to make this go away and get a funky date. So, you know, like that, right? I've hit my space bar. I go back, I delete this, and I go 15 days from or prior to closing. So the benefit of writing 15 days prior to closing is that if you were to exercise the extension, this date moves with it. That's the benefit of writing it this way, right? And then closing, final loan approval, our template says 8 days prior to closing because you can't really close very nicely if you write it for less than that. The buyer must be given 3 days to review their final loan disclosure, required by law, 3 days. So if you take off 3 days here, that takes you to 5. On the 5th day, they approve it. The bank now has to generate all the documents. The client has to go in and sign. The client has to go for their final walkthrough. The client has to transfer the funds into escrow, right? All by 3 days prior to closing. So it gets a little tight. If you were to write a 7 or 6 day closing, right? So we recommend, this is no time to stress everybody, right? This closing is a stressful time as it is. It's at closing where the buyer and seller get really like irritated with each other. They've had it, they're stressed out. Everybody has to move and pack and think about all these details and all this stuff. And why add more stress by rushing everybody at the end? So try not to do that. And that's why our template says 8 days. Okay. And it's just good to know that H5 says seller's right to cancel. Should the buyer fail to satisfy any obligation under paragraphs H2, H3, and H4 within the specified time period, then seller may elect to terminate this purchase contract pursuant to O3. And we haven't gone over the termination clauses yet, but O3 is the termination clause that gives them a couple of extra days. So they go, she didn't come up with her conditional loan approval. And the agent says, oh, it's coming, it's coming. I don't trust it. Let's cancel this deal. So they might give Betty a couple of days, but then they might cancel. So that's what the seller's right is here. And O3 gives Betty all of her money back. So under the seller's right to cancel for financing reasons does not give the seller the right to keep the deposit. All right, and that takes us to section I, the seller's disclosure. And this, of course, is the most important section, right, of the contract, because this is where the most disputes happen. So the first thing for you to know is when you represent a buyer and you're in escrow and you receive a seller's disclosure, you want to review it and you want to ask your buyer to review it. And then you want to say, so you and I are going to talk about this tomorrow. let's each take our time reviewing it and come up with our questions. And then I'm going to consolidate our questions and I'm going to submit those to the listing agent and see if we can't get those answered. That is a normal part of the seller's disclosure. You do not need to have it fit and say, oh my God, there's later discovered information because they didn't disclose this. You know, well, within the first 7 days or that your buyer has to review this document, there's always this back and forth of clarification, and that's okay. The most important thing about that, however, is that you ask very clearly, I have 6 questions, and you enumerate them, and you make sure you get answers to all your 6 questions, and you save the questions and the answers with your seller's disclosure in command, right? You want to save, because that's really a part and parcel of the seller's disclosure. So the way we have our contract filled out is we give the seller 7 days to provide the seller's disclosure. And then once it's provided, it skips down to I3. The buyer has 3 days to acknowledge receipt by signing the receipt. And then the buyer has 7 days to review the seller's disclosure. If the seller has newly discovered information to provide, then an amended disclosure statement would be provided by the seller as per I2, and it must be done within 4 days of the seller's discovery of whatever it is. So what's an example? Recently we had one, there was a leak. We had a big rainstorm here, and sure enough, these things always happen in escrow. There was a new leak. So the seller had to write an amendment to the seller's disclosure and say on, you know, December, whatever that date was, there was a new leak and the seller is going to have it repaired. And now the buyer has 15 days to reconsider this newly revealed disclosed information. And the buyer can say, I want to see the leak. I want to see how bad it is. I want to know what it is you're doing. The seller no longer has any right to make any repairs or do anything to that house without the buyer's agreement. And they do it anyway. They make repairs and whatnot. And some buyers don't care, right? Just fix it. Just fix it. To me, it's always a good thing to do is to kind of judge, like, has this seller taken good care of this property until now? Or is this property like has a lot of deferred maintenance? They haven't done things very well. So now, do I really trust this seller to make this repair? So I would want to probably interject myself if that were the case and say, who's making the repair? I'd like to be present when the repair is being done and when the repair is being tested, right? Because you have to test roof leaks. So, you know, you want to decide, right? And see what happens here. So you want to be a part of that. So that's why there's 15 days here. The buyer can also say, we don't want you to fix the repair. We want a credit instead. We're going to bring our roofer out. We're going to have our roofer inspect the roof and decide what the cost is. And then we'll talk to you about what to do here. The next section of the seller's disclosure is I4, which is when the buyer does their home inspection as per section J1. And the inspector discovers, oh my God, you know, this door frame is totally rotted out. Look at this. I can just stick my finger in here. It looks all pretty. It's nicely painted, but in fact, it's totally rotted. And this is termite damage. I don't see any live termites, but I mean, the guy's only going to poke it with a little nail or something, right? But he noticed that it's spongy, and it's spongy all over the place. So now you've got not only on that door frame, but it's happening on this window frame, and it's happening over here. And now you've got, oh my God, there's all this termite damage on this property. And the seller had no idea. This is later discovered information by the buyer. And how this works is as follows. The buyer is given 15 days from the day of discovery of the failure or the inaccuracy, right? Inaccuracy being the seller should have known the door frames were spongy, but so just not disclosing that is an inaccuracy. Or it could be less days and from the receipt of an amended disclosure statement. Now, the reason we fill this in at 15 days is because if you leave it at 15 days, then the date of discovery for the buyer or by the buyer is the start date for counting these days. If you change this to 10 days, now in order to count the 10 days, whoops, you have to, oh Christ, I can't type again. You have to receive an amended disclosure statement. And an amendment requires signatures from both parties. On this first thing, the buyer's agent can just notify the seller and say, we just discovered that all the door frames and window frames are spongy and have termite damage, and we are reviewing this under section I-4 of later discovered information with a start date of yesterday when the inspection was held. That's it. You just tell them that that's what's happening, right? And now the listing agent's going to run to the property and the seller is going to run to the property and say, what, is this true? And they go, oh my God, we had no idea, da, da, da. Right? Da, da, da. So we leave this at 15 days so that we don't have to worry about this amended disclosure statement, okay? The form does not say who provides the amended disclosure statement, when must it be received, how must it be, it doesn't say anything. So it's vague and it's just easier to leave it at 15. All right. What are the buyer's remedies? Well, the buyer can cancel, right? Now, in practice, we also negotiate here. We can also, now the buyer is going to say, I'm bringing a contractor in and a contractor told me it would cost $10,000 to replace all these window frames. And then I need a painter to come in and repaint them. And that's another $1,000. And the seller says, what, $1,000 to paint some door frames? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to agree to $11,000. I'll give you $8,000. And they negotiate, right? And come to some sort of settlement. Yeah. And now if they come to a settlement, what is going to happen here is if it's $8,000, an amendment gets written that says seller shall credit buyer $8,000 at closing, period. Or you agree that the seller shall make all these repairs prior to closing, right? Whichever way you work it out, or your buyer and seller work it out. Yeah. All right, so that's our disclosure section. And keep in mind, I just want to add here, where is this section? Oh, why don't I have that? Oh, here it is. So the seller has to disclose anything from existing reports prepared by third-party consultants, including licensed engineer, land surveyor, geologist, wood destroying insect control expert, contractor, or other home inspection expert dealing with matters within the scope of the profession of the licensee, right? Of the whatever the license is that this expert has. Facts provided to the seller by managing agent or a homeowners association, including without limitation a condominium, co-op, or community association. So if the condo docs have new information, or if the board of directors minutes tell us something new, that's a later discovered information. If the termite report says there's a lot of damage, that's later discovered information. So those paragraphs don't have cancellation clauses. The cancellation option happens as part of the seller's disclosure. Everything reverts back to the seller's disclosure if there's an issue. All right. Okay. where are we? Okay, now we're at general disclosures. So the general disclosures, you really need to go over these yourselves. I'm not going to dwell on these, but when you present the contract to a client, you want to briefly touch on these, right? And some of them are going to pertain to a condo, and some of them are going to pertain not to a condo or more to a single family home. So in this instance, for instance, governmental and private restrictions, what that refers to is you're part of a homeowners association, or in this case, a condo association. It's going to tell you, you cannot change the windows. You cannot put in a loft. You cannot enclose your lanai. You cannot do a whole bunch of things, right? That is part of the restriction that you have to comply with. And you understand that you're purchasing a property that has these restrictions. Building permits tends to pertain more to single family residences. If you were to change out the kitchen in a condo, that does not require building permits. So it wouldn't really apply. So this applies mostly for single family. Asbestos disclosure, yes, that can apply to a condo. We still have some condos with popcorn ceilings. Now, a popcorn ceiling doesn't mean absolutely that it's asbestos, but it's likely. And asbestos is a big deal to remove. So you want to perhaps get a test done to make sure whether that popcorn ceiling is asbestos. You can start by asking the property manager and say, do you know whether the old ceilings in this property are asbestos? And they go, yes, all the old ceilings are asbestos. And here's the company. They probably have a company that remediates it, right? Takes care of it. So you want to find out about that. Asbestos also is anything prior to 1979. So it's kind of right at the same time as lead-based paint, right? Kind of easy to remember. And it comes up in old linoleum tiles. It comes up in what's it called? The things that wrap pipes or hot water heaters, right? To keep the hot water warm. So those kinds of wrappings tend to, if they're old, could have asbestos in them. Asbestos is only dangerous when it's disturbed, when you start painting it, or when you start to scrape up the old linoleum. That's when it's dangerous. So leaving the wrapping around the pipes, just putting new flooring over old flooring is going to be an easy way to deal with asbestos. Obviously, people don't want popcorn ceilings anymore, so you will probably want to look into what it would take to remove that. Hazardous waste and toxic substances, not going to apply to a condo, but if you're selling a home and there were car repairs being done, you might have some, gasoline or engine oil in the ground. So you'd want to disclose that. Wastewater systems. We have lots of additional information on wastewater systems. On single family homes, it could be a cesspool or septic system. And so you'll want to learn about that. Our buyer's disclosure, by the way, gives more information on wastewater systems. So use the buyer's disclosure with your buyers. It's not an attachment to a purchase contract. It's just a disclosure to help you talk about certain things to your client. It talks about wastewater systems. It also talks about condominiumized properties. So consider using that form. It can be found in My KW under all the forms that we use. A mold disclosure, if somebody is concerned about mold, because there's, there looks like there was a leak under the kitchen sink and there's some blackness there, let's have a mold test done. So you might want to offer that to your client. Sex offenders, don't look it up. Do not inform yourself. That is the buyer's choice. You do not want to know this. The seller's agent, listing agent does not want to know this. If the buyer is concerned, they can look it up on websites or contact the police department. Flood zones, we clearly need to look up flood zones. For those of us on Maui, our flood zone link is right here. You click on the link, you put in the address, and it'll tell you if the property is in a flood zone or not. And clearly, if it is, the association is dealing with flood zone insurance, right? So that's part of what the association covers. But if you're buying a ground floor unit that is near the ocean, it might pertain to you. So you're going to want to talk to insurance agents about that. Lead-based paint. Lots of our condos were built before 1978. So yes, a lead-based paint addendum is not uncommon for our condos, and they are required for anything built prior to 1978.
I have a question on that actually. So if it was built prior to 78, but it's been completely remodeled and abated after the fact, does that still count?
So here's the thing. We provide the lead-based paint disclosure form with the contract. Your buyer should not sign it until the seller has filled it out and sent it back. And the seller is going to say, I am not aware of any lead-based paint, or I am aware of lead-based paint, right? So the awareness has to do with, let's say they've owned this unit for 30 years. Have they painted it in those 30 years? Yes, I have. So that was after 1978. So there's no more lead in our paint. So I am not aware of any lead-based paint in this unit. So if the unit has, even if it wasn't renovated, but just painted, the seller can say, I'm not aware of any lead-based paint here.
Okay.
If you're selling a single family home or a property, and some of them have not been kept up well, right? Some of these older homes, there's no renovations at all. Have a lead-based paint test done. And the couple of times that people have done that, it's actually turned out houses built in the 60s didn't have lead-based paint. So the date doesn't guarantee that there was lead-based paint there, but better to be sure. Now, can anybody tell me who you would want to recommend a test to in particular? Anybody got an opinion on that? Why is lead-based paint such a big issue?
Because kids like to pick up anything they can and put it in their mouth.
Thank you. So if you're selling something that's old, like a single family home that was built in the 60s, and it's, you know, it's made out of hollow tile, it's going to be there forever. It's a great home, but it's got peeling paint and it was built in the 60s. And this is a young family with little kids buying it. You get that lead-based paint test done, right? So that's the sign, that's the alarm bell that should go off. Clearly, we disclose it to everybody, but we want to be particularly cautious if there's a young family moving in. It's
Can
a
I
big-
just ask a quick question on that? So if it did have a lead-based paint underneath and you repaint it, the issue is gone. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh.
So most people don't go around and have tests done about the paint, right? And they didn't in the 80s and 90s. Nobody tested their paint. They just painted over it. And supposedly, well, if the current paint on the wall didn't have lead because it was painted back in 2000, then I am not aware of any lead-based paint. And I've never had the place tested, so I don't know. Does that make sense? I honestly don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah, you have to have it tested in order to be sure. So if somebody wants to be sure, pay for the test. Climate change and natural hazards, we have tsunamis, we have hurricanes, we have a lot of weather here, we have lows that cause huge damage, right? We have Kona storms that cause huge damage. All the time I've lived here, the storms that were not predicted to be dangerous ended up being the dangerous storms, right? We have windstorms several times every winter and trees go down and power lines are out and oh my goodness. So yes, we have weather. We also have coqui frogs, we have fire ants, we have sea level rise, and we've got definite erosion of our beaches. You know, on the North Shore, Baldwin Beach it's just a shocker. You want to see sea level rise, you just go to Baldwin Beach and go with somebody who can tell you what used to be there. It's just shocking. So it's happening, and we need to just remind people what are all the signs here. And then finally, the wired fraud, wired funds and sensitive personal information. We all must have a conversation with our clients about this. There is a document under the buyer section that you can provide your buyer to go over and review. It was provided by Old Republic. And the thing is that how these scammers work is they notice, they follow realtors' emails, and they notice correspondence, and somehow they get one of our emails and they create a new email address called marion.haller@gmail.com. Looks just like my email. And they copy my signature, and they send a notification to Betty, and the email says, Betty, there is a change in the wiring instructions. So I am providing you the change in the wiring instructions attached here too. Please download this and use that information to wire your instructions. And Betty thinks, oh, Marion's my realtor. That's fine. I'll do that. No, no, nobody is going to contact you via email to tell you there's a change in wiring instructions. As a matter of fact, escrow can't even change the wiring instructions close to money coming in. Can't do it. So we need to tell people, do not accept anything that says the wiring instructions have changed. The moment you see something, you call me or you call the escrow officer, right? So we have to warn our clients about this. This is happening. This has happened here on Maui. It's happened in Honolulu. It's happened all over the place, and the money is gone. So please, please warn your clients. All right, that takes us to the big paragraph J1. And before we cover J1, why don't we take a 7-minute break and everybody come back at 20 after 11:20. Just everybody go walk around, get a new glass of water. Just, yeah. Oh boy, oh boy. Hi, everybody. Are we back?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just say, I commend you all for being here and learning your purchase contract. It's such an important part of our business, and it's so crucial to know it. I teach a 6-hour class on this, a CE class, and I get lots of people coming to do it again and again, because every time they take it, they learn something new, they get deeper into it. So good for you for being here and learning your purchase contract.
Awesome.
All right. Back we go. And section J1. Yeah, this is our general inspection. This is the big paragraph because our purchase contract really provides the buyer the opportunity to determine if this is the house they want to buy or if this is the condo they want to buy. That's what the purchase contract does, right? And this is most important to people because people say like, okay, can I get out of this? Like, if I don't like it, can I get out of this? And the answer is yes. And some people come from different parts of the country where they get a lot of information in advance. And the truth is, here in Hawaii, people don't have a right to think about, here's what I say to people, you don't have the right to think about this property and consider it until you have it under contract. Because if you want to go look at the M1 documents, if you wanted to review the seller's disclosure, if you want to do all this research about this property first, somebody else is going to come along and snag it up, and you've done all your work for nothing. The way we do business here, the way we do real estate here in Hawaii is you put this property under contract, you do your investigations, you can go back to the seller and say, you overstated the value of this house, I'm not paying this much, or I want a refund, or I want to change the price or credit or whatever because of this or that or this or that. And then you can decide to go ahead and purchase the property. Now, this paragraph is what allows you to do that. And I literally read this to people. So when I'm working with clients, I would say, okay, I just want to read this to you. At buyer's sole cost and expense, buyer shall have the right to personally or by any expert, professional, or other representative of buyer's choice, A, inspect the property or any portion thereof, B, inspect all major appliances and fixtures, plumbing, electric, and gas included in the sale. C, inspect all public records relating to the property and its use. And D, review all matters concerning the property, including those described in paragraph I-6. In other words, that whole long list we just went through. Seller shall provide buyer and buyer's representatives access to the property for inspections during reasonable hours with reasonable prior notice to the seller. The obligation of buyer to purchase the property is contingent upon buyer's approval of inspections and review of all matters described in paragraph I-6 within, and we fill it out the most common way is 14 days from or after the acceptance date. All inspections and reviews must be completed within this time period. Seller agrees that the property inspection requires that the utilities be turned on, including propane, if applicable, at seller's expense. If buyer disapproves of the inspection or reviews results within the specified time period, buyer may elect to terminate this purchase contract pursuant to paragraph 02, which gives them their money back. The buyer's rights under this paragraph do not affect buyer's rights and timelines under section I, right? That seller's disclosure is separate and apart from this. Now, this is important. If the buyer fails to make an election in writing to terminate this purchase contract within the specified time period, then the buyer will have waived this contingency. What does it mean to waive a contingency?
You no longer have the right to cancel.
That's correct. I'm saying bye-bye, waving bye-bye to this contingency. I am saying it is no longer applicable. Now, in most paragraphs, it doesn't say this, so it's a little vague. And in some paragraphs, termination provision 03 applies, giving buyer or seller a few extra days. In this particular paragraph, the contract is very clear and says, you miss this date, you've waived this contingency. So, representing the buyers, our first most important task when we get an acceptance of escrow is to hire a home inspector on behalf of our buyers, right? And schedule that home inspection. And preferably get that done 9 days prior or 9 days after the acceptance date, within the first 9 days. Why? Because it's going to take the inspector a day or two to generate a report. And even though the buyers might be present at the end of the inspection, which I highly recommend, so that the inspector can take your clients through everything and show them the, disrepairs that they found or the issues that they found. I always recommend to clients, let's wait for the report first and look at the report and see what the report says. And some more things might come up for you that you don't like or that you're concerned about. And then let's work on putting together any requests you might have of the seller. So now if it's 10 days after acceptance or even 11, now you've got 3 or 4 days left to communicate with the seller, right? So now you put together an amendment that says seller agrees to fix this and fix that and whatever it might be. And now the seller gets to come back and say, the seller is going to fix this. And there's no mention of the that, right? In other words, there's a negotiation that goes on and you need to leave enough time for it. So then your buyer says, how about half of this and that, right? Let's ask for a little more. And they go back with yet another amendment. And now it's the 14th day. Well, the seller could just let the clock run out. And they do. So if you see this happening, our job, number one job during escrow is to make sure the timelines are adhered to, is to make sure our client doesn't end up accepting a contingency they don't want to accept or waiving a contingency they don't want to waive. So if I see this happening, I'm going to request an extension to this contingency. I'm just going to send a little amendment and say, J1 is hereby extended to by an additional 2 days or 3 days and give the date.
Okay, so when they come back at you with saying, we'll fix this, but nothing else, that's not a counter that would automatically extends it out then?
Does it say anything about extending it out?
No, but okay.
Is there such a thing as an unwritten thing in a contract?
No, of course not. But you would think that would come back as a counter offer at that point. But if it's not in writing, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So if you do not have an extension to this deadline, this 14 days, and it looks like you're not going to make it, like there's a quibble going on, extend. Now, does the seller have to extend?
No.
No, right. Robert, you have a question.
Yeah, I got a question. I've seen, and not very often, but sometimes a seller will do a home inspection prior to listing the property. And in that case, does the buyer still have the right to do another home inspection, or what do you recommend in that type of case?
Yeah. So it's awesome. When sellers do home inspections, they are fully equipped to now deal with whatever might come up. They can make repairs in advance. They're not going to be surprised that the hot water heater is old and needs replacement, right? There's no surprises. So that's awesome. If I represent the buyer in that circumstance and the seller says, I will give you access to my report, I'm going to ask to pay for that access so that that inspector is also available to answer questions to me. And the inspector will not answer questions on that report unless I pay for some of it, right? So you have to be careful of that. The inspection report is written only for one person or one party, not for that party to give that report to other people. So, and since your buyer was willing to pay for an inspector fully on their own, this is a cheaper inspection. What I would do is I would say to the, if I know of this inspector, or I would do some research on the inspector and around the office and say, hey, has anybody ever heard of this guy? What, is he a good inspector? Should we accept this inspection report? And the answer might be yes, or the answer might be we don't know. And then the other problem is now the seller is going to hopefully have a punch list and say, here's all the things that were wrong, and we fixed it, right? And now you can literally go through and see if they've fixed it. You could hire that same inspector to come back and say, okay, the seller claims to have fixed all these things. Can you come back and check your punch list against, what he's done? So there's lots of ways that you can take advantage of that report and yet still give your buyer more information, like, was it fixed properly? So it depends a little bit on what the items were, how serious they were. If it's plumbing or electrical, did he bring a plumber in, a licensed plumber, or did he just do it himself or bring a buddy in to do it, So those questions come up. That was a long answer, but did I answer you?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, cool. All right. So we all understand our job is to meet this deadline, and that includes the negotiation of any repairs and to write and request an extension if we see that, like if you can't get an inspector in there until 11 days after acceptance, and now that's too tight. So I would immediately ask for an extension of 3 days and say, look, we don't get our report until the 12th or the 13th day. We need 3 days. Just, we don't know what we're going to find. So could we please ask for that extension now? And, are there nasty sellers out there who are going to say, you've got plenty of time to make your, what do you need more time for? Da, da, da. Yes, that can happen. But if you don't ask, you never know. So better to ask. Okay. It is recommended here. Oh, yes, Estelle.
How does the inspector get paid?
Right there on the spot by the buyer.
Like a check?
Yeah, check.
Okay.
I'm sure at this point they'll take Venmo or PayPal or something like that. But the reason they want their money up front is because 2 days later, this buyer could decide not to buy the property. So there is no escrow.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So then we have J3. J3 is basically final walkthrough. and final walkthrough in our template is scheduled for 5 days prior to closing, because that then allows them to then get their funds in and sign their documents after final walkthrough, right? And it also says here that if the property has not been maintained or repaired or corrected as agreed to in writing between the buyer and seller, then the provisions of J4 shall apply, and buyer shall have the right to repeat the final walkthrough of the property after the repairs are completed and prior to closing. So this is kind of an extension of the final walkthrough if things weren't done that were supposed to have been done. But it isn't totally clear. So I would also always like to call on this sentence here if I wanted to redo a walkthrough. I would have a conversation with the listing agent that this applies. So we have not yet, we're not waiving the final walkthrough. So if the buyer or buyer's representative fails to conduct the final walkthrough within the specified time period, buyer will have waived this right. This is the second paragraph that does this. Okay, again, if you don't do it on time. So it has this kind of vague, I have a right to do it later, but you know what? The next sentence says you're going to have waived this right, so you better put it in an amendment. You better amend the final walkthrough date and change it to 2 days prior to closing. Right? So now the buyer has seen the property. There's a couple of things not done yet. You can enact J4, which we'll go over next. Your buyer says, okay, everything's pretty much set. I'm willing to go sign my papers and get my money in. And then let's go look at the property again. Let's give them 3 more days to make these repairs or to fix whatever, right? So then J4 says, if the seller has failed to maintain the property or has not completed any agreed upon repairs. Now, I want to remind you, this is the only place where the contract refers to repairs being made by the seller. There is nothing in the contract that requires the seller to make repairs. Sellers often do, but there's nothing that requires them to, okay? So then it says, if they has not completed any agreed upon repairs or corrections no later than the time period specified in J3, the 5 days, the parties agree that 150% of the estimated cost shall be withheld and collected from the seller and retained in escrow until completion. The parties shall immediately sign escrow's formal withholding and disbursement instruction agreement confirming the withholding set forth in this paragraph. So while you can have a form that says, you know, your J3 walkthrough is not approved and J4 is exercised, that's not enough. Escrow needs to get involved right away. You call escrow up and you say, I need a J4 withholding document from you, and you need to sign that right away. Escrow can hold some funds back from the seller still, but they don't like holding it past closing. So here's what this paragraph says. All bills for maintenance and repairs and corrections will be paid through escrow. Any balance remaining after completion of all maintenance and repairs corrections shall be returned to the seller. Provided, however, that if maintenance and repairs and corrections are not completed by the closing date, and we sign the closing date. Now you could, like, the buyers aren't going to come for 2 weeks after closing. So now you could check within like 7 days and give the seller an additional 7 days after closing to make some repairs. That's up to you. But generally speaking, people are going to move right in and you don't want the seller there making repairs. So we defer to the closing date. And then said funds will be dispersed. If it's not done after that, after closing date, now the funds are going to be dispersed to the buyer. We'll leave it at that. Okay. It gets a little gnarly, so you be sure to involve your broker. right? Be sure to tell your broker, okay, broker, I got this walkthrough today and I'm expecting, I don't think the seller's done everything. Like, what do we do, right? And so you get your broker to make sure to help you the first time you go through one of these. All right. This is just a reminder to the buyer that they can get a home warranty because there is no warranty, right? There's no warranties from the seller on this property. If they want to buy a home warranty, they can insure all the appliances and do that. J7 says that any existing warranties or plans are to be transferred. So this would be, let's say there's a brand new refrigerator. Well, be sure to get the receipt for that refrigerator because that's, you know, it's under at least 1 year warranty. And the seller might have bought the extended warranty. So you want to get those. And plans, people love getting plans, just, you know, obviously not for condo, but for houses. So if there's any plans. And this also refers to that drawer full of manuals for all the appliances, you know, all that stuff. That's what gets transferred here. J8 refers to removal of items from the property no later than 6 days. So if this is set to 5 days, and let's say we want to do a final walkthrough 5 days before closing and we show up at 9 o'clock, then the day before at 9 o'clock at night is when that cleaner needs to be done, right? And everything needs to be out. So this always needs to be a day before final walkthrough. And this refers to trash and junk, both inside and outside of the property, and the fact that the seller has to remove that. And then J9 refers to cleaning, and cleaning, seller shall at seller's expense have the interior of the improvements on the property cleaned. Cleaning shall include appliances, cupboards, drawers, floors, jalousies, screens, windows. Seller shall also have the interior carpets professionally shampooed. Should seller not comply with the specified time period, the provisions of J4 shall apply. So you can have money held to make sure this cleaning gets done prior to closing. And then there's a little checkbox here that says seller shall have the entire property professionally cleaned. So you want to, you know, again, you kind of look around, are these people good housekeepers? Do I want this professionally cleaned or not? Now, in this case, Betty is buying a vacation rental condo. Cleaning probably is going to be really easy because it's totally kept clean by a cleaning service as part of the vacation rental business that's been running there, right? So kind of an easy thing to do here. And yes, you would want to check professionally. However, the seller might come back and say, we're not doing a special cleaning. You're just going to take it over after the last vacationer leaves. We're going to have it cleaned, and that's how you're going to get it. So there might be a little back and forth there. So you might want to talk to them about this. How do you want to do this? How do you want me to fill this out? Right? Yeah. I just want to go back here, and for final walkthrough, I want to see the final walkthrough 5 days prior to closing is to confirm that the property is in the same condition as the property was when they inspected it at J1, to inspect any repairs as agreed upon, and seller understands that the final walkthrough requires that the utilities be on. If the property has not been maintained or repaired or corrected as agreed to, J4 shall apply. I'm just seeing if there's any mention in here. And there is not. There's no mention in here that the final walkthrough requires the house to be vacant. And that's really odd, because how do you do a final walkthrough? How do you make sure everything is what it is? If the carpets aren't picked up, if the sofa isn't gone, you don't know what is behind all those things, right? So there is no specific mention of the property needing to be empty. So there is a clause in the clause editor that refers to that final walkthrough requires the property to be fully empty. So I recently had a sale and we walk in for the final walkthrough and the seller's there. There's a sweet elderly woman and she was just so cool. But anyway, we're walking around the property and I'm kind of surprised that she's there. It's like, what's she doing here? Hasn't she moved yet? And she's got a blow up mattress in the master bedroom and a little suitcase on a little like table. And her slippers are by the bed and she's got a toiletry kit in the bathroom. She's living in this empty house because she's selling it and buying another property on the same day, right? Simultaneous closing. So does she have a right to occupy it? Yes, she does. But we asked for the furniture to be out. And there's one mattress in the middle of the bedroom. You know, of course, that was okay, but it was so cute. So don't be shocked. They are allowed to occupy. They are, well, why would my session end? Anyway, they're allowed to occupy, right? Just not, it has to be empty. Yeah. All right. Pet treatment. You want to ask for a pet treatment if there's pets. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, my pet doesn't have fleas. No such thing. You get a pet treatment if there is a pet in the home. And carpets, right? If there's no carpets, then you want to make sure that the, I haven't dealt with one of those. On a single family home, be careful if that pet lived outside. Now the fleas can be outside and you want to treat that property on the exterior for fleas because boy, do they have a habit of moving in really fast. So it's the termite companies that do this. So you can call them up and get guidance. We suggest that pet treatment be done no later than by closing date, which is why this is filled out with a 0. The system doesn't fill it in for some reason, but that's why it says it that way. I mean, again, if it can be done later, fine, but pet treatment is done after the carpet is shampooed. So the carpet gets shampooed and allow it to dry a day or two. And then the pet treatment people come in, they spray, you got to let that dry for 24 hours. And then somebody has to come in and vacuum. So
you just said not to let somebody tell you something about pets, and I just missed that.
That your pet doesn't have fleas.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because, you know, my pet never goes outside. My pet doesn't have any fleas. Well, I'm sorry, but my buyer wants a flea treatment. Just, you know, you don't need to argue with them. You just, I'm sorry, my buyer wants a flea treatment, pet treatment. So, all right. On a condo, we obviously have no staking and survey, but if this were a single family home, one of these two, you can only check one. What's the difference between a staking and a survey? Can anybody tell me?
A staking is when a survey hasn't been done before, right?
No.
Oh.
A staking means the surveyor is going to come along and put, you know, those little wooden posts with the red flags on them. They're going to put those at all the places where the property has corner pins. Every time there's an angle in the property line, there's a pin in the ground that they find and they mark it with these stakes. And that's all that the buyer is going to get. A survey means that they're going to get a map. The map does not necessarily include the house. So if your client is buying a 2-acre property and the house is right in the middle and they want the location of the house on the map, they would need to pay a little extra for that. On a single family residence form, the survey encroachment dates are filled in. And even if you your buyer says, no, I want to have a strong offer, let's not ask for a survey. I'll get it surveyed either now or at some other time. So you want to leave K3. You can say no survey, right? Don't want it. But in case your buyer does a survey, which they can do as per J1, right? If they want a survey, then the encroachment provision does still apply. So you want to leave that in place. All right, and that takes us to termites. And as I've already mentioned to you, termites can happen in condos. And while the condo association is responsible for the termiting, the tenting of the buildings, right? The buyer and seller, the individual owners, are responsible for what happens inside. So like the condo association will most likely tent or treat if the front doors of units have termites. And what they do is they bring in these big vats, tubs, and they take the front doors off and they dip them. And then they let them dry, and then they come back and they hang them up again. And so that's part of what the association does. But the door frames, the kitchen cabinets, the bath cabinets, the window frames, everything on the inside is the owner's responsibility. So please always ask for a termite inspection at a condo. You have to mark if the buyer or the seller is to choose. And if you want to make it easy again, you can say seller can choose. We've got it filled out that it's due 14 days prior to closing because a termite report is only good for 15 days. And the banks know this. So you have the inspection done on the 15th day, and on the 14th day, you get the report, and you go from there. And it is filled out that the seller pays for this, and just leave it at market rate because we don't know how much it costs. It's just like pay for the inspection. That's all there is. If you want to make it a stronger offer, you have the buyer pay for it, right? That doesn't mean the buyer pays for the treatment, just for the report. And then this paragraph talks about treatment, that the seller is obligated to do treatment if it's called for. So you do not want to delete L2. You want to make it that the buyer pays for the inspection report if you want to make this more attractive. Treatment, by the way, spot treatment is very expensive. So don't want to go there. All right, that takes us to documents. And the documents that apply to a condo or a homeowners association might include articles of incorporation and other documents, if any, creating the corporation of the association, right? Bylaws of the corporation and the declaration and similar organizational documents, and any rules relating to the use of the common areas, architectural control, maintenance of units, or payment of money as a regular assessment or otherwise in connection with the provisions. So all of that is what's covered. And a list is kind of provided here, right? If there's anything else, you could add it, but there usually isn't. And we tend to have this filled out that the seller has to provide those documents within 7 days. The buyer provides a receipt of having received them within 3 days. And then the buyer is given a total of 10 days to review those documents. And then we say, we only want these in electronically formatted via email or from an internet site. We don't want them as a hard copy or as a CD. So we say not applicable to having to return a hard copy or a CD. We don't want them that way anymore. And they don't come that way anymore. So what this basically means is that it helps for you to be aware of how onerous these CC&Rs could be. And the newer the development or project, the thicker and more onerous the CC&Rs and all of these documents are. For instance, if here on Maui, we have the Kehalani subdivision, Kehalani's CC&Rs are about this, literally this thick. I'm not exaggerating, in hard copy format. And they are so full of so many things that who would ever guess, that I've dealt with seller's disclosure issues after the fact because buyers a year later put up a swing set and found out that you're not allowed to put up a swing set in Kehalani without the design committee's approval. And they got fined. And so they went after the sellers and said, you didn't tell us this. Well, we said, well, actually, per paragraph M1, it is your job to review those. And they said, yeah, but it's your job to tell us if there's new information. So we went back and forth. And finally, the seller split it with a year after closing, split the cost with the buyer of, what was it? A gazebo. They put up a gazebo of making this gazebo compliant and paying for the fines. So the advice is, if you know this is a new subdivision and the CC&Rs are onerous, recommend to your client that they have an attorney review these, and then they spend an hour with the attorney, and the attorney tells them what's going on here. It probably won't be the actual attorney. It'll probably be a paralegal who works in the attorney's office and does this kind of work. So you might have to call around to find one, but make the effort, right? It's also something you could do right now, like in between being busy, call around to some attorneys and say, do you provide this service, right? And get yourself an attorney that you can recommend your client submits documents to. It's so helpful when you go this route. Okay. And for us, our job is to review at least the house rules. What's it called here? Covenant, no, not the CC&R. House rules, here they are, current house rules, as well as minutes of the last annual meeting and minutes of board meetings if they're issued. You want to read those because those are all in Common English, and you want to be able to make sure your client is aware. Did you know that you can't grow any, you can't, I don't know what, you know, you can't grill on your deck. What do you mean I can't grill on my deck? Yeah, you can't grill on your deck. You have to use the grills that are down in the, you know, on the grounds of the condo. Really? Yeah. You can't smoke on your deck either, on your lanai. You can't hang towels on your railing. I'll never forget when I first read my first CC&R's house rules like that, and I saw that rule, I thought like, what? Doesn't everybody hang their towels on the railings? Like, where else would you hang your towel to dry, right? And can you imagine what the building would look like if everybody hung their towels on the railings, right? And I kind of went like, oh, geez, of course, duh. So even in vacation rentals, you have to make the rules apparent to people and say, you may not hang towels on railings, right? So those kinds of things are in the house rules, and it's good to have a conversation about them. Make sure your buyers read them. Yeah. All right. And then, yeah, like I said, your buyer has 10 days according to the form here. Now, if you've got an attorney and you need a little extra time here, ask for a little longer period here. If your client says, yes, I want an attorney to review, give yourself a little more time. It's going to be hard to get an attorney to do this in 10 days, right? So make it 14 or 18 or something. And you can say, my client wants to have an attorney review the documents. Okay, fine. All right. And that takes us to Section N. And Section N is very deceiving because it's called rental matters, but it's not just about rental matters. It's about possession. So you must check one or the other. No option here. You can't say not applicable to both, because the first one says delivery of possession of the property free of tenants. So that's what has to apply here. Betty wants to move in. That's what she wants. And then this one becomes not applicable, right? Now notice this one has the days filled in. Every time you see the days filled in and you don't want this one to apply, I urge you to take them out, because otherwise it kind of makes your contract look a little like not personalized and potentially confusing. It isn't confusing because it says NA here, but it's just better if you blank out pre-filled items if it's not going to apply in your contract. So this says, I get the, you know, I'm moving in, I get it on day of recordation. This here, if this is checked, now it means that the buyer gets to review all these documents, and they usually have 7 days to get them and 7 days to review them. And What if you don't like the documents? Or what's happened in the past to me is I submit the documents and the seller had said the buyer had said they wanted the tenants, and then they meet the tenant and they go, oops, we don't want this tenant anymore. And now you go, okay, now what? Well, the reality is the paragraph only gives the buyer the right to either accept the documents because they asked for the property with tenants. That's how they wrote the contract, right? This is what this says. I want the tenants, so give me the documents, or they can cancel. Nothing says you must vacate this house now because I don't like these documents, right? No, that's not what the contract says. So what usually happens though is the buyer and seller negotiate and the seller agrees to give the tenant notice, but they shouldn't do that until J1 is accepted. When J1 is waived and the inspection period is done, sellers feel more comfortable, like, okay, this buyer is going to stick, they're going to buy. So, okay, I'll give my tenant notice now. Now they're going to give them 45 days notice. That's what's required. And then it'll take 3 or 4 days to finish up, right? Make sure it's clean. Maybe I have to have somebody come in and clean it better. And then the buyer has to go to closing and sign and put their money in, and all of that has to happen. So adding another 5 days is totally feasible. So now you're going to have to extend your closing to facilitate a 45-day vacating by the tenant. And in this market, people are taking 45 days, believe me. So, yeah. Okay. And you would do all that in an amendment, right? Yeah. All right. And that takes us to our N3. N3 is important because N3 says, during the escrow period, seller shall not, without the prior written consent of the buyer, make any changes to the documents described in N2 or enter into any new rental agreements or vacation rental reservations. So, and sellers do this, they get sneaky, right? And they all of a sudden, oh yeah, I signed a lease. Well, that's in violation of the contract. And so now, in fact, you can't cancel a lease. Can't do that. So that would give the the buyer a right to cancel. That's a tough one, right? Or vacation rental bookings, taking a vacation rental booking beyond the closing date. The seller has no right to do that. They can take a vacation rental booking during escrow, but not beyond that. All right, and that takes us to our termination provisions. There are 3. The first one, 01, basically says, if a party is in default, the other party has rights. And default means they're not going to close. This refers to if somebody decides not to close. Sometimes they try to cancel early. There's no provision in the contract that allows them to cancel early, but except if there's a contingency and they don't want to meet that contingency, they want to cancel as a result of that contingency, that's fine. But outside of those contingencies, there's no general cancellation clause here. So if suddenly a party wants to cancel in the event that the buyer is in default, in other words, the buyer refuses to buy in the end, then, and the seller's not in default, then the seller may terminate this purchase contract and bring an action for damages for breach of contract, or retain the initial earnest money deposit and all additional deposits provided for this purchase contract. So that's what the contract says. And that's what we tell our clients that they are in risk of if they suddenly change their mind. However, the reality of how this works is a little different than what it says here. In reality, escrow, who's holding the money and holding the contract, cannot do anything unless the buyer and seller agree. So the buyer and seller are going to be given cancellation instructions, and those instructions say, buyer, you're canceling, you're in default. all of your money goes to all of the deposits go to the seller, and the seller signs it. And the buyer says, I'm not giving you my money. Are you crazy? No, I'm not signing that. And when one party refuses to sign those cancellation instructions, escrow is now in a stalemate and cannot act. So this goes to the principal brokers, and the principal brokers of the two organizations come involved, and we try to talk to the clients, and we try to get them to be reasonable, and we try to settle this whole thing. And oftentimes there is some settlement involved. Like, what if the seller has moved out? What if the seller has vacated the tenant and is actually out money? I have had it where the buyer says, okay, I see that you moved, your tenant moved out. I'll give you $10,000. And the seller says, well, I'd rather take $10,000 than hire an attorney. So yeah, I'll take the $10,000 and I'll find myself a new buyer. And they take the $10,000, and now they sign new escrow instructions that credits the seller $10,000. So the reality is that collecting on that full deposit is challenging because both parties have to agree at the time that the action is taken. The same thing is true, by the way, if you wanted to write a contract that is really attractive and says, buyer agrees to release funds to the seller 7 days after blah, 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 right? Or to make the money go hard and that the money becomes non-refundable. And then later on, they change their mind. The money is refundable because he has to sign it again at the time that the money should be non-refundable. And he's not going to sign when he's upset with the other party. So that is if the buyer is in default. In the event that the seller is in default. So what if the seller goes all the way through escrow and at the very end they go, oh, we've got nowhere to move to. There's nothing happened. No, we don't want to sell anymore. Well, that's a little tougher. So here we've got the buyer may terminate this purchase contract and bring an action for damages for breach of contract. Notice both parties can sue each other. Thank you very much, right? Yeah. Or B, listen to this, seek specific performance of this purchase contract. What does that mean? Specific performance.
They're forced to sell.
You got to sell.
Yeah.
Now, in order to seek specific, it's the same thing. You got to go to court. The judge has to say, hey, seller, you signed this contract. This contract is for the sale of our property. You can't just change your mind. Too late. Sell. And sometimes the court will issue a deed and sell it for the seller because the seller won't sign. Too bad. Gone. Now, everybody has to hire attorneys to do that, right? So it doesn't happen very often, but it's a possibility. So the reason this is an important paragraph to review with clients is to help them understand, are you sure you want to sell? Because you don't want to change your mind once you're in contract because you can't. Sellers, this is a very buyer-centric contract, and sellers cannot get out unless the buyer doesn't perform. So sellers better be clear that they want to sell their property, right? That's what that means. All right, termination provision 02 says, here are the rules. If you have a contingency and the buyer decides to cancel within that contingency, they have a right to do that and they will get their money back. And if there is another contingency and the seller has a right to cancel as, oh no, the seller doesn't have any 02 rights. Seller have any 02 rights? No, I don't think so. This is all about within a contingency, and the contingencies that allow for cancellation like this tend to be written for buyers so that they can get their earnest money deposit back. So for the seller's disclosure, for J1 inspection period, for the documents, all those things the buyer's review of the inclusion list. All those have a time period, and at the end of the time period, you need to make your decision or you've moved on. That contingency basically gets waived. Whether or not that paragraph is there doesn't really matter. Once it's past a contingency that is subject to O2, there is no extension of that contingency. Now, sometimes that happens. Like we try to get our clients to cooperate and they don't, or God knows whatever happens. And there's the next day, and now the buyer says, oh, please, Mr. Seller, please give me another couple of days to make this, to review this and make a decision. And the seller says, okay. And everybody signs an amendment that extends this contingency. That has happened. So as long as the buyer and seller agree, right? As long as they agree, they can do that. Yeah. And then there's termination provision 03. And termination provision 03 says, the way we have it filled out, the party who has the right under this termination provision gets an additional 5 days to make up their mind about this. So there's a couple of places here. So one of them is the seller is obligated to provide the buyer the list of inclusions. So they do that supposedly within 7 days. 7 days come and there's no list, and the listing agent says, oh, my seller is working on it. We'll get it to you by tomorrow. I promise. Oh, okay. Nobody writes an extension. Tomorrow comes and there's no inclusion list. You call them again. They go, oh, she's working on it. I'm so sorry. She got caught up with something else. She'll work on it today and we'll get it to you. Like, absolutely. I'll totally get it to you. Next day comes, no inclusion list. And by the third day, the buyer says, you know what? I don't like the seller who can't get it together to tell me what's included or not. I think I'd like to cancel. So how many days have we got? We got 5 days here. So it's really important that you know that there's 5 days that your client has to consider this. At the end of the 5 days, they waive that right to cancel. So if it's the 4th day, you want to warn your client, say, okay, you got 1 more day to decide if you want to cancel because of this inclusion list not coming to us. And the buyer might say, you know what, if you don't get it by tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I would like to sign cancellation. I don't want to deal with somebody who's not willing to cooperate. I don't want to go into this deal with them. And that has happened. Another one is, I showed it to you, H5. H5 is all those financing and cash contingencies. And H5 simply says, if the buyer misses any one of the dates that are set in the financing and cash contingencies, then the seller has a right to cancel per 03. So the earnest money deposit, the initial earnest money deposit doesn't come in on time, 3 days. It's supposed to be there in 3 days. It's end of day 3, no deposit. Day 4 happens. End of day 4, there's no earnest money deposit. And the seller says, I'm not playing this game. Let's cancel. They don't have to wait the 5 days. They can cancel on day 2 of that time period, right? So that's termination provision 03. And it is applicable to only several paragraphs. You will notice, maybe you did or you didn't, but our paragraphs tell us what the termination provisions are. Let's see if we can find this. Right? Nope. You see it anywhere in here?
On E.
Right, it is. 02, right there. Termination provision 02, right? Because this is a buyer's contingency. And if the seller doesn't provide it in time, is there a termination provision? No, there isn't. There's only the buyer's approval is due 10 days. Yeah, so every paragraph has its own termination provision named. It states it. So we just need to find that. And anytime you have a question about a paragraph, you can check out what the termination provision is. All right, the rest of this is, you know, pretty standard. You can read it through it. There's mediation is in good faith agreed to, in good faith, meaning it's not obligatory, but it's agreed to in good faith. Arbitration is recommended if the two parties have an issue. Third party claims, of course, don't apply. Choice of laws, this is Hawaii, it's all by Hawaii law, and any arbitration or mediation would be done in the county where the property is. HARPTA and FERPTA are explained here. So if HARPTA or FERPTA apply, it's worthwhile to note this is here to explain it to your client. And it's always important to explain it to a buyer, because letting them know that when you go to sell your property and you go back to California and you want your money transferred to California, then HARPTA will apply. And HARPTA right now is at 7.25%. FERPTA is between 10 and 15%, depending on the price and the use of the property. That's our section Q. This just says, you know, we don't promise rental value. We don't promise future sale value. We can't be held responsible for what the buyers and sellers do. And we have permission to publish the sales price on the MLS. And oh yeah, if one of you are buying for yourself or your auntie or your mom or whatever, you need to disclose here that buyer is related to buyer's real estate agent, you know, who holds an active license in Hawaii. And on the last page, look at how bringing in the listing brings the whole information in about the listing agent and the listing brokerage. It's so convenient to do this. And here is, you know, our name, and Betty Byers going to go up here. And you don't need to put a date, because when they sign electronically, it'll get dated and a timestamp will apply. Otherwise, you would do that. Now, why is there a title here? You don't need to say buyer's name, because she's the buyer. It's already the buyer, right? What would be a title that might apply here?
Dr. Reverend.
No, that's a good guess, but no. This is for if this is a trust, right? So if Betty wants to put this and buy this into her trust, and so the buyer's name is the Betty Byer Revocable Living Trust, then the title would be she is the trustee. Make sense? Or if a corporation is buying it, she is a partner, or the operating manager, or the CEO, or the president, right, of a corporation, ABC Corporation, the Betty Byer Corporation, and she is the president. That's what title is for. Okay, that's our purchase contract. And I now want to go back. I'm just going to show you the post-closing occupancy addendum is not difficult. It's very specific. It says, what are the dates of the occupancy? What is the rate, the daily rate that is to be paid? And oftentimes when you make an offer, if you want to make a strong offer, you let them stay for free, that it's part, they're staying in the unit for another 30 days as part of what they get. 60 days is a long time, and you might want something. For sure, there's a security deposit. We urge you to collect a security deposit because you no longer have the purchase contract to fall back on. You need that. This says that the property needs to be cleaned as it was required and agreed to in the purchase contract, but there's no more money, right? So you want to collect a security deposit for somebody staying in the unit after. You want to identify what they're paying, and whatever the rest of this is. Yeah, they should get liability insurance. And by the way, liability insurance is cheap. So this is not, if you put in $1 million liability insurance, this is not an expensive thing for the seller to obtain. And that's our Yes, Robert, you have a question.
Yeah, so say there is a post occupancy by the seller, and the owner has a owner occupant loan. Will that affect it at all, or is that something like a question
No.
for the lender?
No, because that's why we do this, because it's not a lease, it's not a tenancy. It is an extension of the sale.
Got it. Thanks.
You bet. Great question. Okay, and the only other thing I want to pull out here is a counter offer. So what if we now get a counter offer, right? And I'm not sure if we cover this tomorrow for you, but a counter offer is pretty easy. So let's say the seller, right? And that's, they're going to answer today, and they're going to mark that it's the seller answering. And now they can fill in Betty Buyer here, right? And they're going to put in Sam Seller. Whoops. See how that becomes a date. Ooh, here we go. Ooh. And now it asks some questions, right? So when does this counter offer expire? Okay. Let's say I'm a seller and I got the offer today and I want to counter, I'm going to give them 2 days. So I'm going to say at 3 p.m. And I always like 3 p.m. If you make things due at 5 p.m., you're going to work in the evening. So try to make things due at 3 p.m. And we go, let's give them 2 days to counter this, to consider this. And now, is there any change in the agency disclosure? No change. Not that it's not applicable, it's no change. Is there any change in the initial earnest money deposit and how it should be provided? No change. Now, this paragraph that talks about the money doesn't have a no change option, which means you're supposed to fill it all in. However, if you went here and said no change, that would apply, right? So you can do that and say, no, we're not countering you on the money. We'll accept your money. We want to counter you on this. We're going, excuse me, we're going to do this. And we're going to say delete post-closing occupancy. Seller changed their mind. I don't want that. And then they're going to do something else. And then they're going to say, one, you got to enumerate these here. And you're going to say reference L to termite. And you're going to say change to buyer shall pay for termite inspection report. I'm making it up, right? And that could be the counteroffer. And now Betty Buyer gets this counteroffer and she says, I don't want to pay for the termite inspection or whatever it is. It's okay with me that the post-closing occupancy doesn't apply. Obviously, I'm happy to do that. But to also, you know, whatever, right? So if that were the case, if she wanted to counter the counter, she would now have to write a counter offer, and it would look very similar here, except she'd check in the buyer. And then she'd say no change, no change, no change. And then she'd go up here and she'd say, delete post-closing occupancy. Because your counteroffer is not countering the counteroffer. Your counteroffer needs to always amend the contract because the first counteroffer is going to go away. So you want to pick up the elements that you accept, and you want to cross out or not pick up the elements that you don't want to accept. So she does not want to accept this counteroffer where there is a change in the termite report. So she's going to go here, and her counteroffer is going to have this taken out, and this is her counteroffer. because this amends the purchase contract, communicates back to the seller, oh, she still wants me to pay for the termite inspection. Okay. But she's taking off the post-closing occupancy. Okay. See how that works? And the seller goes, okay, I'll accept that. So that's how counter offers work, right? So hopefully we give you an opportunity to practice that. All right. So that said, I am going to arrange for some homework to be sent to you. So Betty Buyer is going to want you to find a condo for her, and I want you to write up a purchase contract, and I want you to send it to your coach for review. And if those guys, those of you who are in Honolulu, please ask your brokers to review this practice contract. You want to practice writing a purchase contract. You do not want to practice this on your client. So please, please, please have enough self-respect for yourself to practice your purchase contract. So Lori is going to send you a homework sheet to help you, you know, and I don't even know if it needs to be specific. You can just, you know, because everybody's on so many different islands, you can just pick a condo. Just know that Betty only has like $75,000, and with just $75,000, let me ask you this: would you advise Betty to put all $75,000 down?
No,
Why not?
because other costs can pop up that she wasn't expecting. And also, I think, doesn't the bank need to verify that she has more than that amount?
Well, it depends on the loan. Some loans don't require any additional assets or reserve funds, like an FHA loan and VA loans, those don't. Conventional financing does. But let's talk about this. What all the things that she still has to pay for in addition to her down payment? Let's list them.
Closing costs,
Yeah, closing
part of
costs.
the title.
All the things that are in the
escrow
closing
cost.
costs, right? The insurance and title insurance and the insurance for the condo and recordation fees and deed prep fees. I don't know what all they are, escrow fees, right? All that stuff. Yeah. What else does she have to do?
Moving expenses, security
Moving costs.
deposits.
Yes, thank you, Bill. She has to move. She has to move. Oh my God. What happens when you move to a new place? What do you want?
Utilities turn on.
Oh, there's that. You need
Furnitures.
security deposits for utilities. That's a good one. Yes, you're going to have to put security deposits down, right? For a new electric account or whatever. Do you want like new curtains? Do you want some new cleaning supplies? Do you want some new towels for your nice new bathroom, right? You want some things, right? So you can see you're going to want also your closing costs are going to include your maintenance fees. You're going to have money for your maintenance fee that you got to pay, right? So you can see there's a whole bunch of expenses. How about some repairs? What if there's some repairs needed and she wanted this condo, she accepted it as is, and there's some repairs. She needs to bring somebody in. It's going to cost her about $1,500. She needs to have that, right? So you kind of add that all up and you go, you know what, Betty, I think we're going to use $50,000 of your money and we're going to hold 25. So you've got money, and that'll even leave you, that should leave you somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to have as a little cushion. Right? Yeah. So that's our job. Lenders don't necessarily talk to people about that. We do. So you want to just have that conversation, especially with first-time home buyers, because they don't think that way, right? Yeah. So when you get this homework assignment, I will ask Lori to send something out to you to remind you, please do your purchase contract. And you also want to practice e-signature, right? So I didn't go into e-signature. Let me just quickly go there. E-signature. So let's say I want to have this signed. I'm going to go to e-signature right here, e-sign. And I'm going to start a new, new transaction. And I want to sign the purchase contract, and I want to sign the as-is addendum and the post-closing occupancy. The cooperating broker's separate agreement, I'm going to do that once I get accepted, right? I'm not going to do that right away. Okay, okay. And if I want to add something from outside that needs signature, I can add something here. I can even not choose anything from zip forms, but only add an external document. So you can use e-signature here, e-sign, for external documents, but you can't add something that doesn't need signing. That you have to add as an attachment in your email. So I've picked my 3 contracts. I go to close. I'm going to name this packet. I'm going to say Cam Sands PC, yeah, purchase contract. There we go. And well, it's going to be the title. So I'm going to say Cam Sands 8206. And I might spell it out because, like I said, this becomes the header in the email that gets sent to the client. All right. Here are my forms. Yes, those are the correct forms. And I'm going to hit next. And now here's Betty Buyer. So she's 1, and I need to put her last name in there. And then she's Betty at AOL.com. And fortunately, that is a real email address and it accepts it. Oops, no. It's been blocked by requests. Well, that's a new one. So I'm going to go Betty Buyer, Betty.Buyer at AOL.com. How's that? Okay, I'll take that. And then I've got to find, so here's Keone, right? He came in because I've got him as my broker. So I click that. And if his name isn't there, I can just add him under the selling broker category and add his email address. It also works to put him in your contacts, into your zip forms contacts, so that your broker is always there. You just got to give them the right title, right, to make sure they show up under the right category. Oh, so what happened to Betty? Didn't I? So I have to go back. County and Betty. Oh, it still won't take her. It still won't take her. So I don't know what to do here.
There's a space.
You have a space between the period and buyer.
Oh. There we go. Took it. Okay, thank you. See, now this is great that that happened. I can't tell you how often I have new agents calling me up and saying, my e-signature program won't work. My client's not getting their thing. And they're just all upset. And it's just so terrible. I've done everything. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I guarantee you it's a typo. I guarantee you it is a typo in the email address, just like I just did. Now, fortunately, this won't even take an incorrect email address like that. But typos often, if I'd spelt bet without a Y, left the Y off, the system wouldn't know that. And so it would accept it. So just be aware to, if something's going wrong in e-signature, check your spelling. All right, so now I got Keone and Betty and they're in the right order. If I wanted to change the order, I could just drag them, right? But I want my broker to review first. And I hit the next button, and now the signatures come up. This is my opportunity to make sure the signatures are right. The beauty of using eSign is it pre-populates the necessary signatures, all except the broker. So we need to make sure we are in the purchase contract, and you can see there's no signature up here. Whereas if you scroll down, there's Betty Buyer's initials already showing, like they're going to appear here. This is just a placeholder, right? To let you see that it's already set, but there's nothing here. So up here under signers, we make sure that Keone is the name that comes up, not Betty, right? Both names are here. I could manipulate signatures for both. And it says Keone. And now I'm going to drag and drop, and it gives me these options. And I want to drag and drop a sign, not an initial, but a sign. So I drag it here for Keone's signature. See how that works? Now, sometimes you have to do that to other documents. Like I'm not sure that addenda populate automatically, or that other things do. Like if you had an seller's disclosure receipt or something, right? I'm not sure about those. But you can see here that the Betty is all covered here. And we can go to the very end, and there's her signature required. So bingo, we got that. Now we're going to go to the next document, and we have addenda, and we've got Betty buyer signing. That's great. Here's the as is condition. Yep, Betty's signature is there. And here is the post-closing occupancy. We've got our initials there, and initials and a signature. Look at that. It totally pre-populates. DocuSign takes a long time to learn to do that. And then you hit next, and you can send the invitation right here, or here's a customized invitation. Just send it. If you've already told your client you're expecting it, you gave it the right title, right? Cam Sands 8206 purchase contract. That's what your client's going to look for. You can just send the invitation. And again, text your broker and say, okay, just sent you my contract. Now, how do I get out of here? Get out of here. I want to go back. No. Okay.
Hey, Marianne, am I understanding this correctly, that it's going to send it to Keone first, and then once he's done signing it, then it'll prompt to email Betty Buyer after that?
It'll go directly to Betty. That's correct.
Only after Keone had signed it, only after
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm just going to show you. I can't get. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Get out of here. Shoot. Oh, God. Here's our transaction. I can go back in. I can go to documents. And now I totally spaced on what I wanted to show you that I wanted to do. Oh, I wanted to show you how to check on it. So if you open the transaction, there should be view all e-signings, right? You can go right here. And there's the envelope. And it has not yet, it is not green. If this dot were green, it would have meant that I sent it. If the dot is yellow, it means something got stalled somewhere. If it's red, it means you canceled it. So you can open the envelope. You can edit what's going on here. You can also delete it. You can also go and say, let's see here. I would like to send, where is that? No. Well, I can't do it yet because it hasn't been activated yet. But on an active transaction, you can actually go in here. It gives you the option to send him another email. He says, I didn't get that email. Send it to me again. So you can actually send him another email right here. You can also edit the entire transaction. You might have to start all over. So you might want to just cancel the whole thing, but that's up to you. The other thing I wanted to show you is in the transaction, the first thing you want to do if I'm your broker is send me a copy of your contract for review before you send it in DocuSign. You can send it in DocuSign, but if I've got edits, I'm going to not sign. I'm going to tell you the edits, and then you have to stop your signing, go back into zip forms, make the changes in the contract, and start a new transaction or pull this revised document in there. So I am going to click this. And once you click the purchase contract, you can hit the send button. Do not use the approve, submit for review button. This button does not work for us. Please don't use it. Go to send, and it says send what? I want to send it via Zip Forms Community. And I can choose Marian Haller and send it to her. Done. And now I can write Marion a little email and say, Marion, could you please review this contract for me? And it'll be sent to me as a PDF, as an attachment. Okay. And then you get feedback, then you can go into the form, you can make the changes, and then you set up the e-signature. Make sense? That was a lot of information today, you guys, and I've gone way over. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. I am so happy for all of you guys getting your career started. So we'll see you next week. Next week we're doing, you're going to see me for a listing agreement, and that's far easier than the purchase contract. So.
Marion, when do you expect this video will be posted? Because I'm going to want to go through this at least once or twice more.
Okay, so I have to say this was particularly good. I seem to have remembered to cover a lot of stuff. So I would give it a day, but there's already videos of me doing this from prior Ignites.
Okay.
So if you wanted to go over something this afternoon, I mean, the purchase contract portion is the same. Sometimes I forget about pulling in the MLS. Sometimes I forget about the e-sign. So, you know, I don't, they're all a little different. But yes, it should already be in the shared drive.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, you have a great afternoon. Awesome. See you soon.
Thank you.
You
Thank
bet.
you.
Bye.